Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome today to what inshallah will be a very beneficial and inspirational inshallah session. Before I go into for those who need an introduction to the Shaykh, I want to just go through the program today. The program will start and we will have a Maghrib break from 5:20 to 6 p.m. Then the second session will be, inshallah, from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. We will have a break for Isha between 7 and 7:30, which will be followed by a refreshments break from 7:30 to 7:45. And the last and final session will be 7:45 till 10 p.m. There will be questions, chance for questions when the Shaykh gives the opportunity, but we ask that they should be specific to today's seminar and related to the topics that are discussed. Now, for an introduction to the Sheikh, if he really needs one, Sheikh Tahir Wyatt is originally from Philadelphia, USA, and he accepted Islam in 1993 at the age of 16. After 3 successful and exemplary semesters at university studying and graduating in mathematics, he applied and was granted a full scholarship to study at the prestigious Islamic University of Medina in Saudi Arabia. Sheikh Tahir received his associate's degree in Arabic language in 1999 and his BA in the science of Hadith and Islamic studies in 2003. In 2004, he received his first postgraduate degree in Islamic studies, and in 2009, Sheikh Tahir was awarded a Master of Arts degree in Tada, which is Islamic creed. In November 2012, Sheikh Tahir was appointed by royal decree as the first person to teach Islam in English at the Prophet ﷺ's masjid in Medina. He then went on to earn his PhD at the Islamic University of Medina. He received the highest classification of Mumtaz distinction with a recommendation to publish his work. And with no further ado, I ask the Shaykh inshallah to start his seminar.
Alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh. ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We've got a long day today, but let me just say this to start out with. As Mujahid rahimahullah ta'ala said, he who is shy will not learn. يعني المستحي لا يتعلم. So there are going to be several questions that you are asked today. Put some thought into the answers to those questions and work with me, because it's going to be very important that you are a participant. Today we're going to have classes or a series of classes, not lectures, and I hope that that's understood. That means that you have to participate. And if you're shy, you're not going to learn. وَلَا يَتَعَلَّمَ الْمُتَكَبِّرُ. And also the one who is full of pride and ego is also not going to learn. So if you think you know everything, or you're sitting back like, I already know everything that there is to know about Islam, you're not going to learn. You have to be somebody who has a degree of humility and also a degree of courage in order to learn the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second thing is that it's never too late to learn. So don't think that because you've reached a certain age that you cannot learn, or that you should not be studying the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Knowledge is a lifelong pursuit, so it does not matter how old you get. In fact, how many of you have heard of the great scholar? His name is Ibn al-Jawzi, not Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, but Ibn al-Jawzi. Have you ever heard of it? Raise your hand if you've heard of Ibn al-Jawzi. Ibn al-Jawzi did not start learning qira'at, which are the different modes of recitation of the Quran, until he was 80 years old. And so I don't see anybody here that looks 80. The point is that no matter how old you get, there's still something that you can learn from the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ibn Hazm, who was a great scholar from the Zahiri madhab, he didn't start studying Islam until he was 26 years old, which was considered to be old to start studying back then. And the reason is, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, this is the story that's narrated, is that he went into the masjid and he sat down. He was waiting for a janazah, and they told him, stand up, pray 2 rak'ahs. The Prophet ﷺ said, when you come to the masjid, don't sit down until you pray 2 rak'ahs. So he stood up, he prayed 2 rak'ahs. He went back to the masjid another time. It was close to Salat al-Maghrib. And he started praying 2 rak'ahs. And the people in the masjid said, stop praying, stop praying. And so he said, what is this? I come and I sit down, and they tell me, stand up and pray 2 rak'ahs. I come and I pray, they tell me, stop, sit down. It's not a time for prayer. He said, show me the house of the faqih. It's Abu Abdullah al-Faqih. So he went there and he started studying the Muwatta of Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, and the rest is history. Became one of the great scholars of Islam. So the point is that we do have to push ourselves in this pursuit of knowledge. The other point that I'd like to make before we get started today, inshallah ta'ala, is just to recognize that this is a noble pursuit. And that is the pursuit of learning more about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's deen. You could be doing anything right now, and a lot of other people are doing other things. They're entertaining themselves, and in fact, the level of entertainment that exists in the world today is beyond anything, I think, imaginable, especially for those who are, above the age of 30, for example. You look back to your own childhood, and what people do today was not something that we could envision back then. The fact that you can walk around with entertainment in your hand constantly doing what? Thinking about other than what you were created for. And that's what entertainment does. It takes you away, and that's not to say that it's haram or anything like that, because things that are done with a degree of moderation are okay. But it's just to recognize that we weren't created for that. And it is a great blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide you to a majlis or a sitting in which we are reminded of Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is from the forms of worship. And Allah Azza wa Jalla tells us in the Quran, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ فَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Yani Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to summarize what He's saying in these ayat, is that in the creation of the heavens and the earth and the alternation of night and day are signs for people of understanding. Those who remember Allah when standing, on their sides, or when sitting, and on their sides, laying down. And they do what? يَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. They actually give thought. This is ibadah. To think about the creation of the heavens and the earth. رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا. Oh Allah, you did not create all of this for no purpose. You didn't create all of this in vain. Who is doing that now? Who thinks about the creation of the heavens and the earth? إِلَّا مَنْ رَحِمَ اللَّهِ. Except for those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mercy on, because we're too busy doing nothing. I hate to say it like that, but that's the way it is. Busy doing what? You can ask a child, he's 7 years old, come do ABC. I'm busy. I'm busy doing what? Playing Fortnite. I mean, this is busy. So the point is that it's a great blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to guide us to want to learn His deen. And today, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, we're going to cover what we can from a monumental book that was written by one of the greatest contemporary scholars, Rahman bin Nasir al-Saadi, rahimahullah ta'ala, who was the Sheikh of many of the Sheikhs whom you probably have heard of, like Sheikh Demean, rahimahullah ta'ala. He was his main Sheikh. And Sheikh Rahman bin Nasir al-Saadi, who died in 1373, I believe that's 1963 or something like that, or 53, I'm not sure. But he's contemporary nonetheless. The Sheikh, rahimahullah ta'ala, was considered to be the second coming of Ibn al-Qayyim, if you will. He was one who focused on the heart, but he was extremely knowledgeable about fiqh and usul al-fiqh and qawaid al-fiqhiyya and tafsir and aqeedah and multiple sciences in Islam. And one of the books that he's most famous for is a poem. One of the books that's taught the most often is a poem that he wrote that deals with al-qawaid al-fiqhiyya, which can be loosely translated as legal maxims or universal principles in Islam, which we'll talk about in a minute, inshallah. The point is, he starts off this poetry, and we're going to cover a different book that he did on qawaid, but I want to just deal with this poetry real quick because it's going to give us an introduction to what we're covering today. And he begins by talking about the importance of knowledge. So he says, "I'lam hudita anna afdal al-minan ilmun yuzilu shakka anka wad-daran wa yakshifu al-haqqa lidhil qulubi wa yusilu al-'abda ila al-matlubi." Here he says, no, may Allah guide you. May Allah guide you. Hudita anna afdal al-minan, that the best of all favors is knowledge. The best favor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is knowledge. Yuzilu shakka anka wad-daran. What kind of knowledge? Knowledge that has certain characteristics. It is a knowledge that removes from you doubt, misconceptions, anything that falls under that term shak. So the knowledge that you gain of the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should serve that purpose, that it removes from you any doubts that you may have or misconceptions. It also removes ad-daran, which is another word for filth or impurities that are in the heart. And this is one of the primary objectives of the mission of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he purifies us, that he removes any filth and impurity from the heart. And does anybody know, and I'm actually asking you a question, I don't want to answer it, I want you to answer it. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam's mission was summed up in the Quran. In Surah Al-Baqarah, I'm bringing it close for you. Surah Al-Baqarah, in the dua of one of the prophets. Does anybody know what that dua was that tells us what the mission of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was? You know, these lights I can't see too much, so you might have to shake your hand, not just raise it. Wow. Tayyib, fadda. The Dua of Ibrahim, alone or somebody else was with him? And Ismail. Nah, alayhim as-salam. That's correct. And in that dua, they said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rabbana wa ba'ath fihim rasulan minhum. Oh, our Lord, send among them, or send to them a messenger from among them, yatlu alayhim ayatik, reciting to them your verses. So this was the first objective of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, is that he brings the revelation to us, the way that it was revealed to him. And this is something that we should be proud of as Muslims. There's no other deen on the face of the earth that has revelation as it was revealed to their prophet. The Jews do not have a book that was revealed to Musa and it's with them today unadulterated. Even they don't even claim that. The Christians do not have the Injil. They have Anajil. They have Gospels. They don't have the Gospel of Christ. They don't have that. They have the Gospel according to Mark, the Gospel according to Matthew, the Gospel according to Luke, so on. So the reality is that the Prophet ﷺ, one of the main aspects of his mission was to bring us the revelation as it was revealed, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took responsibility for preserving that, and so we have the Quran today as it was revealed to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And wallahi, that's a great ni'mah. There's no ability whatsoever to be able to articulate that ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that was the first part. Yatlu alayhim ayatik. That is that he recites to them your signs. That is the Quran. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. And he teaches them the book, and he teaches them the wisdom, meaning the sunnah. Like, what's the difference between reciting the ayat and teaching them the book? Anybody, you can scream it out. What's the difference? Again? طيب. Exactly. So we have recitation, and then teaching is actually the explanation of the Quran. So the Prophet ﷺ did not simply bring the book, he also taught them the meanings of the Quran. And he taught them through his sunnah ﷺ, وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, and to purify them. This was part of the mission of the Prophet ﷺ, that we be purified. So here, the best of knowledge is that which removes doubt, and it is that which purifies the heart. وَيَكْشِفُ الْحَقَّ لِذِي الْقُلُوبِ, and it also reveals the truth to those who have attentive hearts. وَيُوصِلُ الْعَبْدَ إِلَى الْمَطْلُوبِ, and it takes the servant and the one who is seeking that knowledge to his destination. طيب. Then he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, فاحرص على فهمك للقواعد جامعة المسائل الشوارد فترتقي في العلم خير مرتقى وتقتفي سبل الذي قد وفقا. And this is going to explain to us why we're studying what we're studying today. بإذن الله تعالى. He says, فاحرص على فهمك للقواعد. So be keen on understanding the qawaid. Qawaid. Qawaid is the plural of qa'idah. And a qa'idah is usually translated as a principle. But what it's referring to here is the qawaid al-kulliyya al-fiqhiyya. So we're dealing with the universal principles of fiqh from which we are able to know rulings immediately. Okay, so if anybody's made Umrah before, raise your hand. Or Hajj or Umrah, raise your hand. طيب, alhamdulillah. If you're making tawaf, and during the tawaf, you forget how many times you've gone around. You know, maybe either 5 times or 6 times. What do you do? How many times do you count that you've actually made tawaf? Huh? 5 times. 5 times. Okay, we're going to talk about why in a minute. If you prayed Asr, which you just did, inshallah, and then you left the masjid, and as you're walking, you get this little whisper in your mind, and you say, wait a minute, did I pray 3 rakats or 4 rakats? What do? Huh? Man, we need a mic. I need you to scream or something. Like I said, we're not doing lectures tonight. We're having class. Like, what do you do? 4, 3, how do you count it?
We count it as 3.
We count it as 3. We ignore it because why? Because it's Sheikh. Okay. So wait a minute. Let's do another one. You made wudu, and you're headed to the masjid. And then you start thinking, wait a minute, did I do my left foot or not? Waswasa, okay. What's the common thread between these three examples? Is that we have something that we're sure about, and then we have something that is doubtful. And so we have a principle in Islam. We're not going to cover it today, but we have a broad universal principle, and that is al-yaqinu la yazulu bishak. Certainty is not removed by doubt. So I'm certain that I went around the Kaaba 5 times. I'm not certain that I went around 6 times. And so I get rid of the doubt, which is the 6, and I build upon yaqeen, which is 5. But now, let's look at the second one. I prayed, and I'm done the prayer. Being that I'm done the prayer, that means that I know I prayed 4 rakats. What's coming into my mind now is doubt about did I pray 3 or not. That doubt is usually from the shaitan, which, as you know, with wudu is very common. And so, as somebody said, it's waswasa. That waswasa, or those whispers, that's doubt. So we leave that off and we build upon what we know to be certain. All right? So this is known as a qaida fiqhiyya, and it's one of the larger ones, if you will, one of the major qaidas. And we're not going to cover that today. But this is what the Sheikh is talking about when he says, Fahris ala fahmika lil qawaidi. Why? Because they are jami'atul masail al-shawaridi. Because they gather for you those issues which are normally scattered. And you'll see that as we go along, inshallah. So all of these issues of fiqh that are all over the place, what qawaid help you to do is bring them all together. So when you know these principles and you know these legal maxims, they're going to help you understand the deen better. And they're going to help you see that common thread. And a lot of times we don't study Islam like that. A lot of times we study issue by issue. And what qawaid allows you to do is to zoom out and see things a little differently. All right? So it's very important that you study it. Jami'at al-masail al-shawaridi fatabtaqi fil ilmi khayra murtaqa. And so you climb the ladder of knowledge in the best manner. وَتَقْتَفِي سُبْلَ الَّذِي قَدْ وُفِّقَا. And you follow the path of those who have been given Allah's tawfiq, yani from amongst the scholars. Why is that? Because all of them have studied qawaid, and that's from the first things that they study, because it helps to give you that bird's eye view before you go diving into different issues. And so the title was given, so we're going to cover, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, we're going to cover 5 of these qawaid. So we're going to cover 5 of these qawaid this evening, bi'idhnillah, and that is why the title was given. This is not my title, by the way, disclaimer. This is why the title 5 Keys to Success was given, because it is these 5 qawaid, inshallah ta'ala, that through understanding them will help you to grow in your understanding of the deen of Islam, which is a prerequisite for success. All right? Tayyib. So 1 second, inshallah. All right. All right. So the first key, if you will, the first qaida that you're going to cover deals with benefit and detriment, or what are known as al-masalih wal-mafasid, which we're going to, as you see, we'll cover inshallah. Where's that mic? You got the mic? Tayyib. Somebody who can read both Arabic and English. We need them to read this for us here. Okay. Nah. You found somebody? اقرأ يا شيخ.
الشارع لا يأمر إلا بما مصلحته خالصة أو راجحة ولا ينهى إلا عامة مفسدته خالصة أو راجحة.
طيب الشارع لا يأمر إلا بما مصلحته خالصة أو راجحة ولا ينهى إلا عما مفسدته خالصة أو راجحة. Okay, read the English.
Allah only commands that which is totally or predominantly beneficial.
Stop there. All right. What does it mean when we say totally or predominantly beneficial? What does that even mean? Something that's totally beneficial or predominantly beneficial. What does that mean? Scream out. Don't worry about it. Just scream out. Okay, totally beneficial means that it's essential. Okay. No, that's not it. Something that's totally beneficial means that there's absolutely no harm in it whatsoever. There's no harm, there's no difficulty, there's nothing in it that brings pain. It's totally beneficial. Predominantly beneficial means that this thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us with, okay, is beneficial. But it also has some harm in it. But the benefit of it outweighs the harm. Okay? But the benefit of it outweighs the harm. You want an example for that? You do? Okay. Polygyny, which is often called polygamy, which means the license for a man to have more than one wife. Is that totally beneficial? The men don't need to say anything. Let the women answer that question. Okay, we already got the answer. So it's not totally beneficial. But there is a predominant benefit, that the benefit of it outweighs the harm as a system. This is also something important to understand. And to me, these are the things that we need to be understanding when we study this principle here, inshallah, and we'll recap this at the end. That when we talk about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands, or we talk about what He has prohibited, there may be something that you think is beneficial for you, and it's haram. And there may be something that you think is harmful for you, even though it's commanded. And so when we look at polygyny as a system, the benefit of it outweighs the harm. What's the harm in having more than one wife? Injustice? No. That's to somebody that doesn't know what they're doing. So what's going to happen is now there's going to be days when you don't see your children, when you're not a part of nurturing them and helping them grow and develop. The same thing for your first wife or your second wife. They're not going to see you all the time. That's part of the detriment in having more than one family. But the benefit outweighs that. Now, again, for a particular individual, the harm may outweigh the benefit for that particular individual. And in his case, it would not be ma'murun bihi. It wouldn't be something that is commanded. Nor would it even be something legislated for him to do. But we'll talk about that, inshallah. So Allah only commands that which is totally or predominantly beneficial. Totally beneficial like what? Like what? And we're talking about in the eyes of the believers, by the way. Like what? Like Salat. Salat is totally beneficial. We'll talk about that because somebody's going to say no, but it's very difficult to get up for Fajr, right? It stops my sleep. And so that's a harm, and we'll deal with that. And Allah only forbids that which is of total, it should say of total, not totally, which is of, or take away the of, and Allah only forbids that which is totally or predominantly detrimental, yani harmful. Okay. طيب. This qaida that we're covering, it is built upon the aqeedah of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and that is that Allah Azza wa Jal legislates with hikmah. That everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created or legislated, that He has done so with wisdom subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is out of mercy for His creation and out of His kindness for mankind. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done everything. Everything that Allah Azza wa Jalla has legislated has wisdom. And this is known through many of the ayats of the Quran. In fact, Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah ta'ala, said about this particular principle. If there were 100 or 200 ayat in the Quran that indicated this, I would have mentioned them. He said, but there are over 1,000. There are over 1,000 places in the Quran that indicate this principle. From them, and I'll just give you one example so that we can see. وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاتٌ وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاتٌ. طيب. That ayat translates as, in capital punishment, there is life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is telling us what the hikmah is. Why is there capital punishment? What does capital punishment mean, by the way? The death sentence. Some people say other things. The point is, the reason why we use the term capital punishment is so that we understand we're not talking about vigilante justice no, that there's a process. So if someone kills someone else, then they are subject to the death penalty in Islam. And they may be executed by the state. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the reason for that is that in that there is life. So we're talking about taking the life of someone, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no, don't look at it like that. In that capital punishment there is life. How so? Because the fact that somebody knows that by killing someone, they will be subject to themselves being killed, that in a lot of times in itself is a deterrent. And so it's a deterrent for society from doing that, as opposed to the societies where you kill someone and then you do 8 years in prison or something like that. It's a deterrent, a major deterrent, because the person knows that if they do that, then they themselves are also going to be executed, most likely. So that's life. That's life. The second way that it's life is that what happens a lot of times if someone kills, and you got to think, when the revelation came down, this is a time when the world was very tribal. If someone kills someone from another tribe, then what happens? That tribe goes now and they want revenge. So they kill somebody from that tribe, but that tribe gets upset with you, and then you start almost like a civil war. But if the person that actually committed the original crime is executed, then many times that brings the satisfaction to the first party, and then you don't have this, constant war going on, right? So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is explaining to us, some of the hikmah behind the rules that He has given us. Now, here we're going to look at the general meaning of this maxim, which or this principle, which was somewhat covered already, but we'll go over it just a little bit more. All right? And that is, Allah only commands that which is totally or predominantly beneficial. He only forbids that which is totally or predominantly detrimental. And this covers the entire Sharia. It covers, this principle is not just a fiqh principle, by the way. It also covers aqeedah. There's nothing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us to believe except that it is beneficial to us. There's nothing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prevented us from believing except that it is detrimental to us. So if we look at number 1, which says worship. By the way, there are 4 things written here: worship, commercial law, civil law, and criminal law. Does anybody know where that comes from? That comes from the fact that fiqh in general is 4 categories. So as the scholars say, rubu' al-ibadat. So a quarter of fiqh, and it doesn't mean that it's 25%. It means that these are 4 categories. The first category is ibadat. So it is that your worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so if you open up a fiqh book, it's usually going to start with what? What aspect of worship? Tahara. Why does it start with tahara? Because purification is a prerequisite for Salat. And Salat is the most important ritual in Islam. It's the most important ritual in Islam. And when we talk about rituals, we're talking about worship. We're not talking about aqeedah here. Tayyib. That is usually going to be followed. So you're going to have your Salat and your Zakat and Siyam and Hajj and Jihad. And then after that, that is followed by Rubu' al-Mu'amalat. Okay? So the category of Mu'amalat, which can be loosely translated as commercial law. This is dealing with your buying and selling and everything that revolves around trade. And that's because the most important thing in your life is the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the first thing that in general you're going to do that is outside of worship is buy and sell. You know why? Because you need to do something to stay alive. You know what it is? You need to eat and you need to drink. And most of the time, the only way you eat and drink is through what? Through trade. There's some type of trade. And so you have to learn those rules of trade. And so that's the second part that you cover in fiqh. The third is what they call rubu' al-munakahat. So loosely you can translate that as marriage and divorce. Everything that relates to civil law. So your marriage, divorce, custody of the children, and so forth. And then that's followed by rubu' al-jinayat, which covers criminal law. All right, so this is most fiqh books are going to be broken down into those 4 categories. This principle that we're covering, which is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not command us to do anything except that it is totally beneficial or predominantly beneficial, covers all of this. It covers all of this. So if we look at, for example, as-salat. We said that salat is totally beneficial. Correct? Why is that? It's because that salat is what builds the connection between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's the most important connection that you have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is the best form of ibadah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ad-du'a huwa al-ibadah." Dua is the worship. And salat is built upon Surah Al-Fatiha. And Surah Al-Fatiha is dua. And so we see that it's very important for us to understand this. That salat is of total benefit. Now, We'll talk a little bit later, just put it in the back of your head and just say, well, sometimes I find difficulty with Salat. And praying 5 times a day can be difficult, especially if I'm working. We're going to cover that in a little bit, inshallah. Tahir, commercial law. There's nothing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited except that it's beneficial, except that it is detrimental and harmful. Tahir. Let's look at one of the main rules in commercial law. وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعِ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made trade permissible, and He has made riba, interest, haram. طيب. Now, I don't know how it works here in Dubai, but in the West, it's very difficult for a person to purchase a home without getting a mortgage. And those mortgages, if it's a commercial mortgage, it's going to be based on riba. And so somebody comes and says, how can riba be haram if that's the only way that I can own a house? طيب. What's the answer? Sorry? Don't purchase? Okay, so the guy's saying, wait a minute, you telling me don't purchase. I'm paying $2,000 a month for rent, and after 30 years, I'm still not going to own anything. And I can pay less. I can pay $1,500 a month, and then after 30 years, I own something. Sorry? It's only bad for you. The answer is very simple. Don't put your intellect over the deen. Subhanallah, Allah Azza wa Jal, وَمَا كَانَ رَبُّكَ نَسِيًّا. Your Lord was not forgetful. And part of this qaida is to understand that Allah is alim and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is hakim. And there's nothing that He has prohibited except that it's detrimental, even if you see some benefit in it. So let's take a step back and remember what I told you earlier. Don't look at what it is for you. Look at what it means for society as a whole. In general, who is it that benefits from riba? Is it rich people or poor people? The rich people. If you're poor, you don't have anything to loan anybody. So you're not going to get any riba. You're not going to benefit from riba. You're going to be harmed by it. Tayyib, when you look at society as a whole, are the majority of the people wealthy, or are the majority of the people, let's say, middle class and under? Middle class and under, no doubt about it. Okay, in the West, they have that concept, the 1%, right? Who are the 1%? Those are the very wealthy. And then you have everybody else. Okay? The 1%, even when there's recessions and depressions and all types of stuff, they always make out. Because they're going to do predatory lending. You're in a tight spot. You need money in order to accomplish some of your just, regular routine things. So they're going to lend you that money. Let's just say they're going to get 10% back, 20% back, even if it's 5%, 3%. And so here's $100,000, but you need to pay me back $103,000, $110,000, or whatever it may be. How are they benefiting? They're benefiting simply because they have. Because they have money, they're going to make money off of the sweat of poor people. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want that for His servants. فَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَا. So He made riba haram because it's a system that's detrimental to society as a whole, even if it benefits an individual here or there. And by the way, I'm not here we're talking in general, so I don't want anybody to get confused. Or some people may have a particular fatwa on the side. You have some people who come and they say, listen, I'm married, I have 9 children. Nobody will rent to me, which is real. That does happen. I'm not saying here, but I'm saying in the West that does happen. Nobody will rent to me. I have 9 children. I have no other solution except to purchase a home. I can't find an Islamic mortgage. There's no other alternative. Okay, that's a totally different situation. That comes under a different principle that we'll cover later, which is ad-dururat tubihul mahdurat. That necessity removes restriction. So we'll cover that later, inshallah. So that's commercial law. So again, what we see is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited riba, but that prohibition was for what? It's for the benefit of society as a whole, because that system is detrimental, even if there's a benefit to this person or that person. Clear? Tahir. Civil law, we look at child custody, for example. A judge is always going to look at what is most beneficial for the child, because this is what has been commanded by Islam. When we look at criminal law, we talked about walakum fil qisasi hayatun. For you in capital punishment, there is hayat, there is life. In other words, and these are just, examples of some of the things that come under these categories. When we look at the issue of aqeedah, for example, the primary objective of the da'wah of all of the messengers was to call the people to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, to single him out as the sole object of worship, which is called what? At-Tawheed, which is called At-Tawheed. Tawheed is purely beneficial, partly beneficial. What do you think? Purely beneficial. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us an example in the Quran. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, ضرب الله مثلا رجلا فيه شركاء متشاكسون ورجلا سلما لرجل هل يستويان مثلا قل الحمد لله بل أكثرهم لا يعلمون. So Allah Azza wa Jalla gives us this example of a man who's owned, yani he's a slave. He's owned by partners who are at odds. They're not seeing eye to eye. This one is telling him to do this, the other one is telling him to do the opposite. And they're all his masters. Okay? وَرَجُلًا سَلَمًا لِرَجُلٍ. And then a man who is exclusively owned by one master. Are they equal in status? Alhamdulillah. All praises to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one who has multiple idols that he worships. Now, when we say idols, don't think about a tree or a stone. Think about your desire to please other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's an idol that dwells in the heart. If you aim to please someone at the expense of displeasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in other words, at Allah Azza wa Jalla's expense, you are prepared to make someone else happy. Even if it means you're doing something haram, that's an idol that you have in your heart. That has to be broken. Because now, you are not looking solely to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as your object of worship, as the one you want to please. And so what happens is the heart becomes scattered. And the heart that's scattered is a weak heart. And the heart that desires only Allah Azza wa Jal is a strong heart. And it leads to a person being whole. And it leads to true happiness. And this is why Al-Imam Rahman bin Nasir al-Saadi, who we're covering his qawaid now, this is why he says, وَمِنْ أَعْظَمِ فَضَائِلِهِ يعني التوحيد أنه يحرر العبد من رق المخلوقين والتعلق بهم وخوفهم ورجائهم والعمل لأجلهم. That from the greatest benefits of Tawheed and from its virtues is that it frees a person from bondage to the creation and being attached to the creation and fearing them and hoping in them and doing what you do because of them. It frees you from all of that. Because why? Because you're a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And you worship Him alone. وَذَلِكَ الشَّرَفُ الْعَالِي وَالْعِزُّ الْحَقِيقِي. And that is the highest form of nobility. And that is true honor, to be a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, when he was in prison and those men came to him asking him to interpret their dreams, he started off by calling them to Tawheed. أَأَرْبَابٌ مُتَفَرِّقُونَ خَيْرٌ أَمِ اللَّهِ الْوَاحِدُ الْقَهَّارُ. Having these scattered lords, is this better for you, or is Allah the one, the compeller, subhanahu wa ta'ala? طيب. Okay, so we have these principles, and these principles, each one of them, we're going to cover evidence and examples for these principles, inshallah ta'ala. I know that we were supposed to break at 5:20. Is that still the case? 5 minutes, inshallah. All right, so we'll try to get through some of the evidence for this qaid. And by the way, all of the qawaid that we're going to cover today are agreed upon by the scholars. They are all mahal ijma'. There's no differing amongst the scholars about these principles in general. Some of the examples under the principles, there may be difference of opinion. But in terms of the principle itself, there's absolutely no difference of opinion. But we're still going to cover some of the evidence surrounding these principles, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So, the first of them is the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inna Allaha يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in these ayat, or in this ayat, surely Allah commands. Look at what Allah commands. Justice, pure benefit, benevolence, benefit, and generosity towards relatives. So these are things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands, and they are either totally beneficial or predominantly beneficial. He forbids what? He forbids immorality and sin and oppression. And these things are detrimental and harmful to people. He warns you, يَعِذُكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ, so that you may take heed. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us here that what He commands us to do is beneficial, and what He prohibits us from is detrimental. طيب. Likewise, and we'll go through these quickly, inshallah. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, الَّذِينَ يَتَّبِعُونَ الرَّسُولَ النَّبِيَّ الْأُمِّيِّ الَّذِي يَجِدُونَهُ مَكْتُوبًا عِندَهُمْ فِي التَّوْرَاةِ وَالْإِنْجِيلِ. Those who follow the messenger, the unlettered prophet, whom they find mentioned in the Torah and the Gospel, which is with them, in their possession. يَأْمُرُهُمْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَاهُمْ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. He commands them to do what is ma'ruf, what is right and what is good. وَيَنْهَاهُمْ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. And He prohibits them from that which is evil, that which is wrong. وَيُحِلُّ لَهُمُ الطَّيِّبَاتِ. He makes the good things lawful for them. وَيُحَرِّمُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْخَبَائِثِ. And He prohibits them from those things that are khabith, those things that are filthy and unlawful. Ila akhir al-ayah. The point is here that everything that the Prophet ﷺ commanded with is ma'ruf, it is good, and that which he prohibited us from is evil, it's munkar. طيب. Likewise, one of the issues that comes up is if we look at the categories, we talked about something that is totally beneficial. I still got 3 minutes, right? Something that is totally beneficial. We'll just get through this slide and then I'll stop, inshallah. We have things that are totally beneficial and things that are predominantly beneficial. Things that are totally evil, and then those things which are predominantly harmful. And so there are proofs for that in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ قُلْ فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِن نَفْعِهِمَا. طيب. Khamr, or intoxicants, alcoholic drinks, have been prohibited for us. Raise your hand if you think that alcohol has benefit. Everybody should have their hand up because Allah told us in the Quran that there's benefit. There's benefit in alcoholic drinks. It does not mean you should go out and have a drink after the session. It means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is clearly saying here that there's a benefit for people. What's the benefit? Well, tell me. What's the benefit in alcoholic drinks? Yes. Speak up. It's good for the heart? Let's hope not. There actually a recent study came out that said that there isn't any, even though I do know what you're talking about. There are some studies that said that a moderate amount, if you will. But even that, I don't believe that. Now, yes? It gives you a temporary uplift, Allahu A'lam. Maybe it gives you a temporary, make you forget your problems. Alhamdulillah, it's a great thing. Medical, why? It has money benefits. If you sell it, you're going to make some good money. And you can ask the people in England who own bars and pubs and these type of things. There's a benefit. Monetarily, and perhaps, I don't know if there's any medical benefits, Allahu A'lam. But the point is that there's some benefit. Is there a benefit to gambling? If you win, there is. If you lose, there's not. So there's a benefit. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ. There's great sin in it. وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ. In both of them, there are some benefits to people. وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِن نَفْعِهِمَا. But the sin that is in them is greater than the benefit. So what do we get from that? If the sin is greater than the benefit, if the evil outweighs the harm, then what do we get? Then that thing is haram. It is prohibited in Islam. So we're going to stop there, inshallah ta'ala, and we're going to pick up after Salat al-Maghrib, and I'll pick up the pace as well. And it'll be a bit more interactive when we come back because there's going to be a series of questions, inshallah. The point is that you gain as much as you can in getting that broad picture of Islam and understanding the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His Sharia. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad.
I would like to remind everyone, inshallah, for those who already have specific seats, to return to your same seats. And inshallah, for those who came after the initial announcement, there will be refreshments after Salat al-Isha, inshallah. And we'll join back here at 6 p.m. Please be here. We'll have about 5 minutes.
ولي الصالحين وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله بعثه الله رحمة للعالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وأنعم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So we're covering right now the fact that there are certain things in Islam, there are certain things, period, that combine between both the harm and benefit. There's pros and cons. There's benefit and there's detriment. How do we handle that in Islam? What we've said is that if the good of it outweighs the evil, then it is legislated in Islam. And if the harm outweighs the benefit, then it is not permissible. Then it has been forbidden. The first of those proofs is the ayat in Surah Al-Baqarah that talks about alcoholic drinks and gambling. And now we're going to cover the hadith of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, who said that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said to her, لولا حداثة أهد قومك بالكفر لنقضت الكعبة ولجعلتها على أساس إبراهيم. She said, had your people not recently accepted Islam, I would have demolished the Kaaba. طيب. The Kaaba, what shape is the Kaaba? It's a cube, right? However, that's not the way, those are not the foundations of Ibrahim, that it was in a cube shape. And so if you look on the Shami side of the Kaaba, the north side of the Kaaba, you see that there's a semicircle, right? And they call that what? Huh? Sorry? Hijr Ismail, right? In the back part. That's actually part of the Kaaba. So the Prophet ﷺ was telling Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, had it not been for the fact that your people, yani Quraysh, have recently accepted Islam, I would have destroyed the Kaaba, and he raised it, and then built it back upon the foundations of Ibrahim, that were laid by Ibrahim. Because when Quraysh built the Kaaba, they reduced the area, and I would have also put a door at the rear, the Prophet ﷺ said. So here what we have is what? There's something that's good, and then there's something that's bad. The good thing is that the Kaaba be rebuilt the way that it was built upon the foundations of Ibrahim. But the bad thing is that if the Prophet ﷺ did that, he feared that Quraysh would have a problem with it because of the status of the Kaaba. And so they would have looked at that as being something absolutely crazy. And we're talking about the very beginning of the Prophet ﷺ's da'wah. So we're not talking about people having been Muslim for any long period of time. And therefore, the Prophet ﷺ is showing us here the importance of weighing the detriment and the benefit in all situations. And this is why Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, in explaining this hadith, he says, إذا تعارضت المصالح أو تعارضت مصلحة ومفسدة وتعذر الجمع بين فعل المصلحة وترك المفسدة بدأ بالأهم. So here, if we have some type of discrepancy and we're not able to combine between the harm and the benefit, then we look at which is more important, which one is going to outweigh the other. All right, so we have these general rules here. That is that everything that Allah commands is beneficial, either totally or predominantly, and everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibits is harmful, either totally or predominantly. Now we're going to look at some examples of this from the life of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. Tayyib. I wish we had somebody who could read. Anybody? Can we just give the mic to like one person who will take care of the reading for us? Ismail. Sheikh Ismail. تقرأ لنا يا Sheikh? Huh? طيب. That's a good excuse. That's a good excuse. He's wearing glasses, mashallah. Smart people wear glasses, Allahu Akbar. طيب. All right. I'll read for now, but we got to get somebody else later so that I can save some of this voice, inshallah. All right. Jabir radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he says that we were in a battle. فَكَسَعَ رَجُلٌ مِنَ الْمُهَاجِرِينَ رَجُلًا مِنَ الْأَنصَارِ. In other words, he kicked him. Kasa' means he kicked him in his rear end. So now you can imagine that's going to start a fight. And so what happened is, and this is has been omitted from the story, what happened is that the one from the Ansar, he said, Ya lal Ansar, yani he's calling the Ansar to come to his support. And the Muhajiri is calling the rest of the Muhajirin to come to his support. What's the difference between the Muhajirin and the Ansar, by the way? The Muhajirin are the ones that made hijrah. So they accepted Islam in Mecca, and then they made hijrah to Medina. And the Ansar were the Muslims of Medina who welcomed the Prophet ﷺ and the Muhajirin who came prior to him. And so what happened was, now some of the Ansar, some of the people of Medina were actually not Muslims. They weren't Ansar. They were pretending to be Muslim. And they are called what in Islam? Munafiqun. And the Ras, or the head of the hypocrites was Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul. And so what he said was, now mind you, they're all out at battle. He said, when we get back to Medina, لَيُخْرِجَنَّ الْأَعَزُّ مِنْهَا الْأَذَلُ. The honorable from amongst us are going to kick out the dishonorable. So who is he talking about? He's saying we're going to kick the Muhajirin out of Medina. We're going to show them who's boss. And so Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he was upset. And mind you, Abdullah ibn Ubay bin Salul, he was the one who also lied against Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. He's one of the people who was involved in the story of the ifk, saying that Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha committed adultery. He was evil. And again, he was the head of the hypocrites. And so Umar radiallahu anhu said, Ya Rasulullah, da'ni adrib unuqa hadha al-munafiq. Let me decapitate him. Let me take his head off. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, da'hu la yatahaddath an-nas anna Muhammadan yaqtulu ashabahu. He said, leave him. The people should not say that Muhammad kills his companions. Let this sink in here. What is the maslaha here? What is the benefit? Somebody scream it out. Well, okay, we don't. Just killing people is not a benefit. But what are we saying here? That his harm, he would no longer be able to harm the Muslims, because he brought a lot of trouble to the Muslims, to the ummah, and getting rid of that harm is a maslahah. But the Prophet ﷺ looked at something else, and that is that at this stage of Islam, the people from the outside looking in, they're looking at them all as Muslims. They're not looking at, oh, there's hypocrites and there's real Muslims, and no, they're just all Muslim. And if something like that was to happen and be sanctioned by the Prophet ﷺ, the people would begin to say that Muhammad kills his companions. And then what's that going to do? That's going to stop people from accepting Islam. And yeah, ikhwan, brothers and sisters in Islam, be careful about the actions that you do. Because if what you do stops people from entering into Islam, you can talk all the talk you want. And you can say how beautiful Islam is, but if you don't walk the walk, if what you do is in fact something that pushes people away from the deen, then you will be sharing in that sin. And so the Prophet ﷺ did not want that to happen. His mission, he was a mercy to mankind. He didn't want people to leave or not come into the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and accept that mercy. He didn't want that, because people will be saying that Muhammad killed his companions. So we see how this idea of weighing the pros and the cons comes into play. Likewise, no doubt about it. But there were later things that come on down the line when Islam became strong and people could distinguish. They could distinguish that this person was executed because he killed somebody, for example, and people are able to distinguish later on. Anas radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrated that a Bedouin came and urinated in the masjid. All right? So some of the companions stood up. And now, if you think about it, we hold the masjid to be the best place on earth, the most sacred place. It's sanctified, it's supposed to be pure. And you can just imagine, if this was a masjid and somebody came over there and he started urinating, I'd imagine that quite a few people would get up to try to take care of that. Right? The Prophet ﷺ told the companions, Da'uhu wa la tuzrimuh. Leave him. Don't interrupt him. Tayyib. What would be the benefit of them interrupting him? Sorry? Right, we need to stop him from soiling the masjid. Right? But the Prophet ﷺ said, leave him and don't interrupt him. You know why? Where's the benefit in that? The benefit is that normally, if by the time they get to him and they try to move him, the urine is not going to be in one spot now. It's going to be all over the place. Because this one is going to grab him from this way, and this one's going to grab him from that way, and then it's going to go all over the place, right? And so the Prophet ﷺ said, let him be. Now, there's a benefit to the man as well, because obviously if he stops midway, that's going to be detrimental. And then just look at the character of the Prophet ﷺ in dealing with this man, to the point that afterwards the man made dua, and he said, as it comes in the narration of Bukhari, he said, Allahumma arhamni wa Muhammadan wa la tarham ma'ana ahada. Oh Allah, have mercy on me and Muhammad, and don't have mercy on none of them other people. Don't have mercy on anybody else, just me and Muhammad. And the Prophet ﷺ said, لَقَدْ حَجَّبْتَ وَاسِعًا. You've restricted something that is very expansive, meaning the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's enough to go around. And so here, again, what we have is the Prophet ﷺ weighing that pros and the cons. Yes, we may be able to stop him from, soiling the masjid. We teach him a lesson. We teach everybody that comes after him a lesson, right? But that doesn't take precedence over just leaving it in that one place, and then the Prophet ﷺ called for a bucket of water and poured it over the urine. Now, so let's just review this principle, and then we're going to move on, inshallah. There are some things we do need to cover here. So, in review, we have categories of the commanded and prohibited. Number one, we have things that are of pure benefit, like what? Like tawheed, like salat, like dhikr. And all of these things are things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us to do. And because He commanded them, then we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves them, and we know that there is a great benefit in them. We may know that benefit, and we may not know the benefit. And that's very important for us to understand. We may know the benefit, and we may not know the benefit. I'll give you an example. How many of you have dogs? Don't raise your hand if you do. The Prophet ﷺ said that whoever keeps a kelb, whoever keeps and nurtures a dog, except for a hunting dog, wa kalb az-zara', which is the dogs that they use for agriculture to, keep away unwanted things. So like you can say a guard dog, if you will. And some of them mention as well the blind, the seeing dogs. Whoever keeps a dog for other than those reasons, then he loses in ajr every day a mountain worth of hasanat. Somebody comes and now says, well, why? What's wrong with dogs? I don't understand it. And because I don't understand it, then what? I'm going to do what I want to do. That is not Islam. That's not Islam. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu dukhulu fis silmi kaffa. Oh, you who believe, enter into Islam in totality, meaning submit. Because what is your intellect compared to the shara' and the decree and the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Wallahi, as parents, if you tell your child, come here, what's the command? Come here. And your child is doing something else. They feel like whatever it is that you're about to ask them to do is not as important as what they're doing. So your child says to you, why? How do you feel as a parent? You say, hey, come here. You say, why? Oh, that's problematic, isn't it? And no parent is going to accept that from a child. Even though you're both human beings and your child has a brain and so do you. Why do we feel like it's okay for us to say why to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Allah Azza wa Jalla commands us with something. And then we say, well, I don't understand why. So therefore, I'm not going to do it. Llah. What we have to understand, number one, is Allah Azza wa Jalla is Al-Alim. He is Al-Hakim. Everything that He has legislated for us, there's wisdom behind it. Number one. Number two is, If he blesses you with understanding that wisdom, alhamdulillah. If not, then maybe you need to do a little bit more research. And if you still don't understand, you're a Muslim. And so you accept what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded you with, because you also know that not only is He Al-Hakim, but He is Al-Bar, Al-Rahim subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the benevolent and He's merciful and He's beneficent. And that He only commanded you to do it because there's a maslahah for you. And He only prohibits you from doing certain things because there is a mafsada, because there is harm in it. If we understand that, it makes it a lot easier to accept what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us with. Now, just back in August, and you can look it up, I'm sure you probably will, as soon as the next break that we have, you'll be Googling it. Back in August, not right now, please wait until 7 o'clock. Back in August, there was a man whose dog licked him. He lost, because of the bacteria, it created some type of infection. He lost some of his limbs, and it created all types of problems on his face. And he's not the only case that's like that. All because of man's best friend, as they say. And there are other scenarios. I mean, there are other reasons. That's not the reason. But the point is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Hakim, and He is also Bar and Rahim subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tayyib. Pure benefit. Number two, that which is of preponderant benefit or predominantly beneficial. Number three, those things which are purely detrimental. And number four are those things which are predominantly detrimental, even though they may have some benefit, like we mentioned, alcoholic drinks and gambling. That being said, one of the things that we benefit from this particular principle is that everything that is predominantly beneficial is sanctioned in Islam. It may be an obligation. That obligation may be a communal obligation, or it may be an obligation on each and every individual, or it may be something that's mustahab. So, from this, and this is one of the things that Saadi rahimahullah ta'ala mentions in his book, and the scholars followed him in that, is that all of the beneficial sciences, like medicine and engineering, aerospace engineering, plumbing even, learning how to be an electrician, a tailor, all of these things are from Islam. And they are sanctioned by the Sharia, and in fact, the scholars consider them to be a fard kifaya. That is, it is a communal obligation. Everybody has a role to play to advance Islam. And I think that that's very important for us to understand, because a lot of times we downplay the skill set of other Muslims. So if you're a doctor, you look down on the engineer. If you're an engineer, you look down on the plumber. If you're a scholar, you look down on everybody. This is, or you want people to look up to you, whichever way you want to. The idea is that everybody has a role to play. And if everybody only did one thing, then chances are, as an ummah, we would be sinful. So these things, these areas, these sciences are a fard kifaya. Somebody from the ummah, the immediate ummah, has to learn them to suffice the rest of the Muslims. Somebody has to know how to make clothes, because we have to be clothed, right? Somebody has to learn medicine, because we need people to take care of our physical well-being. Somebody has to learn aerospace engineering so that we can fly from place to place. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for somebody who knows how to make airplanes and fly them into the end of it. The point is, we all have a role to play. And this is important also because one of the contemporaries of Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, his name was Abdullah bin Abdul Aziz al-Umari. He was from the great-grandchildren of Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. He was a contemporary of Imam Malik. And he was an abid, meaning he was one of those people who spent his time in the masjid, away from the people, reading the Quran and prayer and so forth. And so he wrote to Imam Malik one day, and he was encouraging him to leave off teaching. You're so busy teaching people that you don't have enough time for the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you should just go be munazil, yani away from the people and to yourself and just worship Allah azza wa jal. So Imam Malik replied to him by saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up different doors for different people. And perhaps the door for him is salat. That door is open for him, figuratively and literally. Because the doors of paradise are how many? 8, not 1. There are 8 gates. Some people will be called from the door of salat. Other people will be called from the door of siyam. Ibn Abdul rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned that normally for most people, if Allah Azza wa Jal blesses them with one form of ibadah, they're not going to be strong in other forms of ibadah. So you might find that this person, as Imam Malik is saying here, يُفْتَحْ لَهُ فِي بَابِ الصِّيَامِ وَلَا يُفْتَحْ لَهُ فِي بَابِ الصَّدَقَةِ, for example. So for him, he finds that fasting is easy for him, but giving charity is difficult. Maybe he doesn't have a lot of money, or maybe his family responsibilities are heavy or whatever. The point is what? That each person strives to do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them good at. And the minute you try to do something that is opposite of what Allah Azza wa Jal created you for, you're going to find it difficult. And that's why the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, "Kullun i'malu fa kullun muyassarun lima khuliqa lah." Work, because each one of you is going to find it easy to do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created him for. Now, we all have to have a common denominator. It's like when you go to university and there are core courses, right? Everybody needs to have certain skills. So we all need to have enough knowledge that we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accordingly. But that's going to be different for different people. A medical professional is going to have to learn things that other people don't. If you have money, you're going to have to learn about zakat. If you don't, you don't have to learn about zakat to the end of it. So the point is that each person is created a certain way, and you need to take advantage of that and excel in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed you in. So just to finish, Imam Malik writes back to him and he says, and perhaps a person, this door is open for him, and he says, وَنَشْرُ الْعِلْمِ وَالْخَيْرِ, to spread knowledge and to spread goodness is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made easy for me. And I don't think that that's any less than what you're doing. And I hope that both of us are upon khair, upon goodness, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yajma'una fi al-jannah, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gathers us in Jannah. طيب. The second point here is that anything that Allah legislates brings about an overall benefit. Again, we're just summarizing. C, it is not necessary that forbidden matters be void of any benefit. There are some people who think that, oh, because this is beneficial or it has some benefit in it, that it's okay for me to do it. It's really not forbidden, and that's not the case. Again, we have to be able to weigh those pros and cons. Tight. We're going to move on. That's the end of Principle 1, inshallah ta'ala, what Allah Azza wa Jalla made easy for us. Let's move on to the second key, which is titled here, Ends and Means. Ends and Means. طيب. نعم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. يلا. العربي والإنجليزي. Go ahead. بسم الله.
Principle 2. الوسائل لها أحكام الوسائل لها أحكام المقاصد. Means adopt the rulings of the ends.
Okay. Means adopt the rulings of their ends. Now, if anybody told you that this seminar was going to be easy, that was false advertising. You're going to have to pay attention. You're going to have to use that brain that Allah Azza wa Jalla has blessed you with. Means adopt the rulings of their ends. Al-wasailu laha ahkam al-maqasid. Now, we mentioned in the first principle that it covers the entirety of the Sharia, that everything in Islam is covered by that principle of maslaha and mafsada. What this principle is talking about, because we're going to transition, is that all of the commands and prohibitions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are considered ends. They're considered maqasid. So for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed, as we mentioned earlier, Salat. And for males that have reached the age of puberty, where should they be praying? In the masjid. طيب. Have we reached the point where you can teleport to the masjid? You just close your eyes and you open them and you're in the masjid. Maybe some of the young guys, they may have gotten that. All right. For the rest of us, we have to get to the masjid. So how do you get to the masjid? You either drive or you walk or some other way, ride your bike or whatever. The end is what? The goal is what? To get to the masjid, to pray. The means is walking or driving or whatever way you get there. You can't pray in Jama'ah unless you do this thing. That thing is called the wasila, the plural of which is al-wasa'il. The goal is the maqsad, the plural of which is al-maqasid. And so now walking to the masjid becomes wajib. Now walking in normal terms is what? If we look at, we have 5 major rulings in Islam, right? What are they? Wajib, which means obligatory. Mustahab, which is something that is encouraged. Mubah, which means what? It's neutral, right? There's no ruling for it. And then you have makruh, which means something that's disliked. It's been prohibited, but not in a strict manner. And then you have haram, which is strictly prohibited. Okay? Walking comes under which one of those categories? It's mubah. It's neutral. It hasn't been commanded or prohibited. But now, because this is the way that you have to get to the masjid, it now takes the ruling of the maqsad, of the goal, of the end. And that goal is what? Wajib. And so now walking becomes what? Wajib. And you will be rewarded as such. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward every step that you take towards the masjid. You get in your car, everything that you've spent on gas to get to the masjid, you're rewarded for the money that you spent, because that is a means towards the end. We understand? So again, what we're talking about now, the first principle that we dealt with, masalih and mafasid, or pros and cons, harm and detriment, those are ends, those are maqasid. Then you have things that lead to them, all right? And so that's what we're going to be covering in this principle, insha'Allah ta'ala. All right, but before we start, we need to get your brains moving. Tayyib. Go ahead, Akhi.
Warm-up questions and answers. What does means adopt the rulings of their ends mean? Do the scholars differ about the validity of this principle?
By the way, you're going to see these questions again, and you're going to work with a partner to answer them. So if you're not sure now, make sure you pay attention. If you already know, you can go. Tayyib, fadda.
2. What are some texts from the Quran and Sunnah that point to the validity of this principle? 3. What is intended by ends and means in the context of this principle? Can something
Number 3. So we kind of just talked about this. What is intended by ends and means in the context of this principle? Anybody want to take a shot? Huh? Ends are the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has clearly legislated or prohibited. Means are the things that are necessary for those other things to happen. Can something be both an end and a mean at the same time? Tahir, let me ask you this. Wudu. Is wudu an end or a mean? It's both. Huh? It's a goal in and of itself, and it's a means to purification, which is necessary for salat. Tahir. Number 4, further.
Some scholars have said that this principle is actually a branch of a larger universal maxim. Name it. 5. Is there a difference between this principle and the statement, the end justify the means? Explain your answer.
Tahir. Okay. Oh, wow. We still have more? Oh, you got a lot of questions today. I'm sorry about that. Go ahead. Further. Keep reading.
The principle that states, anything that is essential to the fulfillment of a command is also commanded. فَلَا يَتُمُّ الْمَأْمُورُ إِلَّا بِهِ فَهُوَ مَأْمُورٌ بِهِ. Is one principle that falls under this principle. What is the relationship between the aforementioned principle and the following? Investing in the stock market.
Anybody invested in the stock market here? You can raise your hand. It's not necessarily haram. Nobody? Allahu Akbar. Okay. All right. Jayyid. Keep going.
Zakat.
Who pays zakat? Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah. Tayyib.
Spousal rights.
Who takes care of their spouse? Alhamdulillah. Nah.
End of life care.
Jayyid. All right.
7. Give an example of a permissible act that leads to abandoning.
So when we're talking about a permissible act, we're talking about something that in general is mubah. You can do it, okay? But it leads to, go ahead.
Committing a forbidden act.
It leads to either abandoning an obligation or committing a forbidden act. It's like we have 25 minutes. We're going to try our best to work through these bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, all right? Okay, so we're going to cover here the general meaning of this principle. Means adopt the rulings of their ends. So we have these different terminology here. The end is something towards which you strive. We would normally call it what? A goal or an objective, okay? That objective being legally commanded or prohibited. And commands in Islam are either wajibat or mustahabbat. So they're either obligatory or encouraged. And that which has been prohibited by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, naha anhu al-manhiyat, they are either haram or makruh. So they are either forbidden or discouraged.
Means adopt the rulings of the ends.
Right. So that's ends. The second one is means. Means. So you look to the right. Anything that leads to or results in an end. So if we look at, for example, backbiting. Backbiting is which category here? Okay, it's haram. If you know that if you sit with this particular group of people, right, then you're going to backbite other people. Sitting with them, sitting with somebody in general is mubah, it's permissible. But if you know that sitting with them is going to lead to you backbiting, then now sitting becomes what? Haram. So it's anything that leads to or results in an end. And it otherwise is void of a legislative ruling. And it doesn't have its own ruling, it's just mubah. Or you can say those channels, those prerequisites or conditions, the shurut, or causes that are necessary to bring an objective to fruition. Type. Adopt the rulings, that is, that they coincide and match in level of obligation and prohibition. So, what that means is, for example, being dutiful to your parents. Being dutiful to your parents is, where does that what category? Birrul walidain. What category does that come under? That's wajib. It's from the greatest obligations that you have. If your mother lives in a different country, how can you be dutiful to her? What are some of the things that you can do? You can call her. You can send money. You can visit her, right? Calling her now, how do you normally call someone in another country these days? Oh, you guys, the Emirates doesn't have WhatsApp calls, huh? Skype maybe or whatever, right? But you're gonna be using the internet. Paying for the internet now becomes wajib. And you're rewarded as such. The same way that people who use the internet for haram purposes to look at things that are haram or otherwise, the money is also haram. It's as if you've paid something that is haram. You understand? The means take the ruling of the ends. Going to the masjid, praying in jama'ah is the end, the means is getting there. Same thing for somebody who's going to a nightclub or going somewhere to drink. And I'm not talking about drink water, you get the point. Every step that they take towards that becomes haram. Now, we understand this principle now. Means adopt the rulings of their ends. Pretty clear? Inshallah. Is that the same as the ends justify the means? The ends justify the means. Anybody know where that came from, by the way? Machiavelli. Have everybody heard of Robin Hood? What did Robin Hood do? He steals from the rich to do what? Give to the poor is a great thing. It is. Giving to the poor is what? That's an end in Islam. And it's something that could be wajib, and it's definitely at least mustahab. Why don't we say here that the means adopt the ruling of the ends? Because the means itself is haram, which is stealing. It's not free of a legal ruling. So this is not something that was mubah, and then we looked at the end and it became haram or makruh or wajib or to the end of it. No, this thing in and of itself is haram. And just because the end or the objective is something good, it doesn't make the means to it good. It doesn't make the means to it justified. So I hope that that's clear, the difference between the two. What are the proofs for this principle? Fadl Sheikh. ذلك ولا يطؤون يغيظ الكفار نعم أيوة. That you can stop right there. Start reading in English.
They do not suffer any thirst or hunger or any ordeal for the sake of Allah.
Thirst or hunger or any ordeal.
Or take any step which may provoke the unbelievers. Or receive any injury from an enemy. But shall be written down as a good deed to their account.
Except that it shall be written down as a good deed to their account. What is the end here? What is the goal? Sorry? To please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Through what? So this ayat, which is, or these ayat, which are in Surah At-Tawbah, are talking about actively defending Islam. That is, so a person is putting his life on the line to defend the deen. Okay? Now, in order to do that, as the Prophet ﷺ has been established in any nation state, you have to have borders. And those borders have to be protected, and you don't allow people to come in. And so here, they're going out to meet whatever enemy there is. Now, that is the goal, to protect Islam, to keep them from harming the Muslims. Clear on that? But there are other things that happened along the way. Thirst, hunger, they may receive injury while doing so. None of that is intended. None of that is an objective in and of itself. But it is necessary to reach the larger objective. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِلَّا كُتِبَ لَهُمْ بِهِ عَمَلٌ صَالِحٌ, that a good deed is written for them. It is written down as a good deeds to their account. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Allah does not waste the reward of the righteous. وَلَا يُنْفِقُونَ نَفَقَةً صَغِيرَةً وَلَا كَبِيرَةً وَلَا يَقْطَعُونَ وَادِيًا إِلَّا كُتِبَ لَهُمْ لِيَجْزِيَهُمُ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنَ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. They don't spend anything, not small or large. They don't cross a valley. All of this is what? All of these are means to an end. And for that reason, Al-Qarafi, rahimahullah ta'ala, who has written a very important book on dealing with this topic, which is called Al-Furuq, he said, فَأَثَابَهُمُ اللَّهُ عَلَى الظَّمَأِ وَالنَّصَبِ وَإِن لَمْ يَكُونَا مِنْ فِعْلِهِمْ لأنهما حصل لهم بسبب التوصل إلى الجهاد الذي هو وسيلة لإعزاز الدين وصون المسلمين. He says, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewarded them for their thirst and for being tired, just being tired in that path, even though none of that is from their own actions, but it happened to them as a means to an end, which is al-jihad, which is to honor the religion and to protect the Muslims. And so for that reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written for them good deeds. Next, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you can just read the English for the sake of time, Sheikh.
Indeed, it is we who bring the dead to life and record what they have put forth and what they have left behind.
Here, what they have put forth, ما قدموا وآثارهم, and what they have left behind. So here it's translated as what they have left behind. But some of the scholars of tafsir, they say ما قدموا وآثارهم actually means their actions and the athar, the things that were necessary to complete those actions. The things that were necessary to complete those actions. And so this is another proof for that principle. فضل وَنَبِي هُرَيْرَةَ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُ أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من سلك طريقا يلتمس فيه علما سهل الله له به طريقا إلى الجنة. Read the English.
Allah's Messenger said, Allah makes the way to Jannah easy for him who treads the path in search of knowledge.
Let's look at this hadith. In this hadith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He makes the way to Jannah easy. For the scholar, is that what this hadith says? Huh? For getting knowledge? Yani for becoming knowledgeable? For memorizing? No. For what? For traveling the path that leads to knowledge. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here, and our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is informing us that the reward is for the path that leads to that thing. That's what's being written down. Not necessarily that a person is smart enough to has a great memory or anything like that he actually becomes a scholar. That's not what the reward for is mentioned in this hadith. And so we see that the reward is for the means. The reward is for the means that lead to that end. Now, read the English.
There was a man who never missed Salat, even though I do not know of anyone who lived farther from the mosque than him.
So This man, he lived right next to the masjid, correct? Huh? Okay, where did he live? Very far away from the masjid. So Ubay ibn Ka'b went to him, and what did he say? Go ahead.
I said to him, why don't you buy a donkey that you can ride when it's dark or when the sun is too hot?
So we're talking about Medina, where it gets to 115, 120 degrees, or what's it that, Celsius? 50, 55 degrees, Celsius in the summertime. And this man he's walking to the masjid. Sand is hot in the daytime. At nighttime, you can't see anything. It's not like they have street lights. So Ubay is saying to him, why don't you just get a donkey? Nah.
He replied, I do not want my house to be next to the mosque. I want the steps I take towards the mosque and back to my family to be recorded.
Okay, so this man says what? I want my steps to the masjid to be recorded for me. I want even the steps that I take to go back home. I want those to be recorded for me.
Upon this, Allah's Messenger ﷺ said, Allah has gathered all that reward for him.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. It's from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we see that here, the reward is for what? For praying in the masjid? Or the reward is for the steps that are taken to go to the masjid? But this hadith gives us another benefit that the prior evidences that we covered did not. And that is that even the steps that he takes to go back home are written for him. And these are what are known as tawabi'. The ones that are going to are called al-wasa'il. What becomes necessary afterwards is called at-tawabi', and a person also gets the reward for that. Look at the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yani, your phone is broken. You need a phone so that you can keep in contact with your mother. You go to buy a new phone with that intention, your reward is great with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so this brings up that importance of thinking about Allah Azza wa Jall's rewards, which we'll cover in just a bit, inshallah. Skip that. Okay, examples of this principle. Examples of this principle. Making Hajj. Making Hajj is an end. What's the means? Huh? The journey towards Hajj. What else? Sorry? Finances. Okay, perfect. Okay, if you have the money to make Hajj and you have the physical ability, can you just get on a plane and go to Saudi Arabia? What do you need? You need a visa. Huh? You need a visa. Getting that visa now is an end to the means, and you're rewarded accordingly from Allah Azza wa Jall's mercy. All right? To the end of it. I mean, there may be some other things that become necessary for you as well. All right. Praying in congregation we talked about. Yalla, visiting the sick. Is that wajib, mustahab, haram, makruh, mubah? Huh? It's wajib. It's wajib, but not on every single person, but on the community. Haqqul Muslim ala al-Muslimi, sit. Prophet ﷺ said that the rights that one Muslim has over the other Muslims are six. From them is visiting the sick. طيب. How does that happen? No, you said till 7 o'clock. Well, I got 10 minutes. I'm not giving them up. We have to stop? Okay. Okay. Can I just finish this slide? Hello. All right. Type, visiting the sick. What do you need to be able to visit the sick? An appointment? I thought I heard somebody say an appointment. Let's hope not. You need a sick person. You need a sick person. Yeah. There's plenty of those around. Plenty. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cure them and keep us in afiyah. Tayyib. So, in other words, but that's actually true. You need to know who the sick people are. And you have to have some concern for the Muslims. And know who those people who are sick. You have to have a means to get to them. Right? So you have to have if you can't drive, then Uber or whatever is used here, Kareem or whatever they use, right? And that money that you spend in order to do that takes the ruling of the end, and you're rewarded accordingly. Right. Following a funeral procession is also a fard kifai. It's also a communal obligation. And everything that is necessary to be able to get that done also become a communal obligation. Type going to a club, wajib or mustahab? I didn't say a nightclub, any club. It could be mustahab, it depends. If you need to lose weight, it's mustahab. Going to a nadi, right? But if we're talking about a club where there are impermissible things happening, then going to that club is haram, and everything that leads to that also becomes haram. Also becomes haram, which should scare a Muslim. Yani when you start thinking about, wait a minute, now you have to start calculating everything that's going on. Because it's not just the act that you're doing, it's everything that's leading to that becomes haram as well. When you get a little time to think about that, those should be some of the things that keep a Muslim from falling into the haram. It's like we have to stop now. We'll come back after Isha, inshallah ta'ala. Wallahu a'lam, sallallahu alayhi wa Mubarak, ala nabiyyina Muhammad. Alhamdulillah. Salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Amma ba'd. We've covered some of these ends here: making hajj, praying in congregation, visiting the sick, following a funeral procession, to the end of it. What we see here, and I was wishing that we didn't have to stop because I wanted to make sure that everything stuck together in terms of thoughts. What you see here is the importance of bringing to mind the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even in the mundane acts that you do, even the things that don't seem to be worship. If you want to, for example, you want to pray a tahajjud. Praying tahajjud is an end. The means to that is what? Sorry? Okay, setting an alarm clock. Okay, if you set your alarm clock, for example, let's just say for 4:30, okay? But you don't go to bed until 3 o'clock because you were watching a movie, then what's probably going to happen? Alarm is not going to do anything for you, right? So going to bed at a decent hour is also important. And if you keep that in mind, then your sleep is a what? It's a means to an end, and it becomes ibadah. We clear on that? Okay. And so now we see how it's related to the large universal principle in Islam, which is al-umuru bimaqasidiha, that matters are determined by their intention. In other words, the more that you are conscious of what you are doing, the more you can make it an intention of yours for which you will be rewarded. So visiting the sick, part of that is knowing who's sick and getting there. And if you get in your car with that intention, I'm going to put gas in my car, or you guys say benzene here, so whatever way it goes, you're going to fill up your car so that you can visit the sick. Then now you know that this money that you're spending to fill up your car, that you're doing that for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as you know, we have different levels when it comes to Islam as a whole. There's Islam, there's Iman, then there's Ihsan, which is worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you see Him. Even though you don't, you know that He sees you subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so there are various levels. And that's why it's so important. This qa'idah, this particular principle that we're covering, is so important because it should make a person more conscious of their intentions. And that's why many of the scholars of Islam say that this principle, which is al-wasa'ilu laha ahkam al-maqasid, or means adopt the rulings of the ends, that it actually comes under this principle, which is matters are determined by their intentions, or as our Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. All right. Now we're going to look at branches of the principle that we're covering. Ends means adopt the rulings of their ends. That's our larger principle. Now let's look at a branch. مَا لَا يَتِمُّ الْمَأْمُورُ إِلَّا بِهِ فَهُوَ مَأْمُورٌ بِهِ. Now, a lot of people read this as مَا لَا يَتِمُّ الْوَاجِبُ إِلَّا بِهِ فَهُوَ وَاجِب. Whatever is necessary for the fulfillment of an obligation also becomes an obligation. Okay. So, for example, reading Surah Al-Fatiha correctly in Salat. What would you say that is? That's mustahab or what? Wajib. Okay. So what that means is that you actually have to take the time to learn the Arabic letters, or at least, that's for most people, or at least you have a good enough ear that you can pick up the sounds properly. But most of the time you're gonna have to learn the letters. So learning Surah Al-Fatiha is going to require you to learn at least enough of reading the Arabic language so that you can recite Surah Al-Fatiha. But the reason why they say Al-Ma'mur, what is commanded, and they didn't say Al-Wajib, is because what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded is actually two categories. What are those categories? Just scream it out. Wajib and Mustahab. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to do something, and there's no leeway in that command, then it is wajib. And if He commands us to do something that there's some leeway in, we have an option, then that becomes something known as mustahab. All right? Tayyib. What are some examples of mustahabbat? Tell me something that you know that's mustahab. Praying sunnah. Okay. Anything else? Drinking while sitting down. Tayyib. Fasting on Mondays and Thursdays. Okay, good. Let's use that as an example. Fasting on Mondays and Thursdays are encouraged. What do you normally need to do to fast? You're going to eat suhoor. You're going to go to bed on time so you can get up for suhoor. You're going to stay up all night like some people do and eat suhoor and then go to sleep afterwards. But the point is, whatever is necessary in order for you to fast on Mondays and Thursdays, then that also becomes mustahab. So eating suhoor becomes mustahab. These are things to just keep in mind, because we should become a lot more aware of our actions when we recognize this principle. So when we look at the commands are broken down into two categories: obligations and encouragements. As was mentioned, fasting on Mondays and Thursdays, making certain dua, praying at night, these are all things that are encouraged in Islam. We talked about tahajjud, for example. Obligations are broken down into two categories. Individual obligations, like what? Like praying 5 times a day. Communal obligations, like what? Sorry? The janazah prayer, for example, is a communal obligation. So whatever is necessary in order to fulfill those obligations also becomes an obligation. Next branch. All right, and this one I want you to pay close attention to. Well, I have to skip some things. All right. النهي عن الشيء نهي عنه وعن كل ما يؤدي إليه. Read that in English, please.
Any prohibition includes the act itself as well as those things which lead to it.
طيب. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited adultery and everything that leads to it. So Allah Azza wa Jal said in the Quran, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا, and don't go close to committing zina. What things may lead to zina? Looking. So, yeah, usually it's going to start because somebody is looking at something they should not be looking at. And Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran, وَكُلِّ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. Tell the believers to lower their gaze. If you're not looking, you're not going to be enticed. Period. If you're not looking, you're not going to be enticed. What else? Sorry? Al-Khalwa? Tabarruj. Okay, so a woman who adorns herself in a certain way instead of wearing hijab could lead to zina. I thought she said khalwa, which is actually what many of the scholars mentioned, which is being alone with someone of the opposite gender who is not permissible for you to be with. Otherwise, no zina is going to happen. If you're not alone, it's not going to happen. And so the Prophet ﷺ prohibited khalwa, that is being alone with the opposite gender. And he mentioned that when that happens, the shaitan is the third, right? So all of these things lead to adultery. Because they lead to that which is haram, they have also been prohibited. We understand that? Please don't forget that, because we're going to go back to it in about 2 minutes, inshallah. Tayyib. Next, consuming alcoholic beverages is prohibited in Islam. Tayyib. What are things that lead to that? Huh? Parties, certain kinds of parties, going to a bar yourself or something like that. So what leads to it, anything that leads to it is also prohibited. Tayyib. Backbiting, halal, haram. Huh? Tayyib. Backbiting is haram. What are some things that lead to backbiting? Being in certain groups may lead to backbiting. And I'm going to tell you something, because I think that this is something that we often don't pay enough attention to. Staying on social media too long usually leads to backbiting. You know why? Because backbiting is simply that you mention something about your brother or sister in Islam that they wouldn't like for you to say about them. That's backbiting, even if it's true. If it's not true, it's called slander. If it is true, it's called backbiting, and it's still haram. And so what you find is too many people, they go on social media and they start, scrolling down and they see, oh, look at this person. Oh, she thinks she's cute. Okay. But look at how this is and look at how that is. Just because they too much time on their hands going through social media, and you start saying things about people that they wouldn't like for you to say about them. And that's backbiting. That is the definition of backbiting. So a person has to be very careful and not to do the things that are going to lead them to speaking about other people in a manner that would be displeasing. Tayyib. Creating enmity between the Muslims is haram. The Prophet ﷺ, and he mentioned al-Muslimu akhul Muslim, la yadhlimuhu, wa la yakhdhuluhu, wa la yahqiruhu. Yani the Muslim is the brother of another Muslim. He doesn't wrong him or oppress him. He doesn't forsake him. He doesn't belittle him. None of these things. Because all of that is going to create enmity between the Muslims. As a side note, I want to thank Dar al-Bir and Markaz al-Ma'lumat al-Islamiyya for the work that they do for those who have recently accepted Islam. And the reason why, a lot of times we don't think about this stuff. The Prophet ﷺ said, La yakhdhuluhu. You know what forsake somebody means? You know what that means? Al-khudlan. What does that mean? Sorry? I can't hear. To forget about them. Okay, yes, it does mean to forget about them, but more than that. To forsake someone means that you leave them out to dry. Yani, they needed you, and you turned your back on them. When somebody accepts Islam, they need us more than any other time. because they need something that's going to help them stay firm. Accepting Islam is one thing, okay? And then learning about your religion and progressing in the religion is another thing. So the work that they're doing is work that takes the sin off of the rest of us, because that's an obligation we have as Muslims, to welcome those who are new to Islam and help them learn their religion. And many of us have forsaken them. So we just get happy when we see somebody accept Islam. Takbir, Allahu Akbar. And then that's it. There's nothing else. There's no follow-up. And that's forsaking them. And so the fact that there are some organizations and brothers and sisters out there who take on that responsibility of teaching these new Muslims, that helps to remove the sin from the rest of us. Anyway, the Prophet ﷺ said that the Muslim is the brother of another Muslim. So anything that is going to create enmity between the believers is haram. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, for example, forbid undercutting and selling. Somebody comes and he offers you, a computer at a certain price, and then a competitor says, well, how much did he offer it to you for? You say, oh, $3,000. No, I can do better than that. This is undercutting, and it's going to create enmity between the business people. Al-khitbah, ala khitbati akhik, that you propose to a woman that you know someone else has already proposed to. This is haram because it creates enmity between the believers. So anything that creates enmity between the Muslims is also haram. And so this is, if you look at what we've just covered, this is related to a larger concept in Islam. And I want you to know what this is called, okay? It's called Sadd al-Dhari'ah. Sadd al-Dhari'ah. And you'll hear the scholars talk about this concept, which we can translate as precautionary laws. So there are certain things that have been put in place in Islam. Not that they are so bad in and of themselves, but because what they lead to oftentimes is evil, then they have been prohibited as well. So for example, the first thing when I asked, what is it that leads to zina? A brother mentioned looking, right? So here, to look at the opposite gender doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's going to go do something that is haram. But because that is a step towards that, then we say that it is haram tahrim al-wasa'il. All right, so in other words, that this thing has been made impermissible because it is a means that leads to an end. We clear on that? Because there's something that follows. Okay, what follows is, if something becomes, if there is a need to do something that has been made impermissible because it is a means to something that is haram, then that thing now becomes halal. Give me an example. Example is this. We just said that looking at the opposite gender is haram, right? But what if you're looking to get married? Now looking at the opposite gender is, or the woman that you want to look at, or vice versa, then it becomes permissible because there is a need here. If you're in the marketplace and you need to be able to identify who the person is that is buying from you, or who the person is that you are selling to, or that you're buying from, then you can look because there is a need to do so. But the rule is this, for those of you who understand Arabic: ما حرم سدا للذريعة يباح للحاجة. Whatever has been made impermissible as a precautionary law, it is permissible when there is a need. It is permissible when there is a need. طيب. All right. We're almost to the end of this particular principle. Here we say any permissible act that leads to abandoning an obligation is deemed to be haram. طيب. Praying Salatul Jumu'ah is what? Wajib even for women? Okay. Wajib for who? For men only? طيب. Boys that are 15. You're a man if you're 15? Not in my house. Tell you. All right. So we'll say that any male that has reached the age of puberty, all right, and is sane, there are different conditions, but in general, yes. Praying Salat al-Jum'ah is wajibah. All right. Buying and selling after the second adhan of Jum'ah. What they mean by the second adhan is once the imam gets on the minbar and he says, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and then the muezzin begins to call the adhan. That's considered to be the second adhan of al-Jum'ah. At this point, forget the prayer. Listening to the khutbah is wajib. Not just the prayer, but listening to the khutbah is wajib. So if a person begins to buy and sell after the second adhan, what are they leaving off? They're leaving off listening to the khutbah. So that buying and selling, even though it's permissible, and that is the base rule of buying and selling is that it's permissible, it now becomes haram because it leads to abandoning listening to the khutbah. Clear? Is that clear? طيب. What is the ruling of buying and selling in general? It's mubah. It's permissible, right? But now because it's happening after the second, even if you were just about to close the deal, if you know that it's the time for the second adhan, or you hear it, finished. That deal is not going to be, there's not going to be any barakah in that deal because it is haram. And so you have to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and know that Allah azza wa jalla is going to write for you what's best. Clear? طيب. Likewise, as we know, the time for prayer is muwassa', yani there's leeway. So dhuhr, for example, comes in at what time? 12:06 or something like that here. And then asr comes in at what time? 3:10. All right. So you have about 3 hours to pray dhuhr. Now, whatever happened, and now it's 3 o'clock. So there's only about 10 minutes left for asr. That's what they call al-waqt al-mudayyiq. Yani it is restricted now at this time because you only have enough time, basically, to pray the obligatory prayer. Doing a business transaction at this time now becomes haram because it's going to lead to you leaving off an obligation. All right? Now, that's very similar to this next one, but I want you to notice the difference. Tayyip, read this one, Yahi.
Any permissible act that leads to committing a forbidden act is deemed to be haram.
What's the difference between this one and the last one? What's the difference? The first one we said what? Abandoning an obligation. This one says what? Committing a forbidden act. Which one do you think is worse? To leave off an obligation or to do something that is haram? To leave off an obligation. Now, in general, this doesn't mean every specific thing, but if you look at the sin of Adam, alayhi salam, and the sin of Iblis, totally different. Iblis left off an obligation. And most of the time, people leave off obligations due to kibr, to arrogance. And that's why Iblis did not obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas people who fall into sins or they do something that is haram, a lot of times it's because of hawa. Their desires have overcome them. And being arrogant and just being totally dismissive of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is worse than a person whose desires got the best of them. All right. So here, any permissible act that leads to committing a forbidden act is deemed to be haram. An example of that is selling grapes to a wine factory. Why? Selling grapes, permissible or impermissible? Permissible. Tayyip, why is it impermissible to sell grapes to a wine factory? Right, because they're going to use it to make wine. And you can't aid them in that, because that's the ta'awun ala al-ithmi wal-udwan. طيب. Another example is al-ina transaction. Have you ever heard of bay' al-ina? Bay' al-ina. Anybody? طيب. I'll give you an example of what bay' al-ina means. Let's just say you have a car. You have a car. All right. And you sell it to somebody for cash, 50,000 cash. Okay. So now what happens is they take the car and you take how much? 50,000. All right. Permissible? That's permissible. And then you say to him, hey, I want to buy that car for 70,000 in installments. I'll pay you back, you know, whatever, 5,000 dirham for the next 14 months. So what just happened? You took the car back, correct? And now you're going to pay this person 5,000 every month for the next 14 months. What just happened? What just happened? He's taking interest. So he's giving you a $50,000 loan and you're paying him back 70,000. You just put the car in there as a loophole to make it look like there was a sale going on, but there was really no sale. There was really no sale. So he gave you 50,000 and now you're going to pay him 70,000 and nothing changed. And that's haram. And it's a form of riba. Okay, so the permissible act was that you sold something, but it led to a forbidden act, which is actually riba. That's really what bay' al-ina is. What is tahleel marriage? What is tahleel marriage? This happens when a man has divorced his wife how many times? 3 times, right. At-talaqu marratan. So you have that leeway of divorcing your wife twice. Not that it's recommended, but I'm just saying that there's that leeway. After the 3rd time, it's over. There's no returning unless hatta tankiha zawjan ghayrah, until she marries another man and that marriage is consummated. And then he divorces her. Only after that will it be permissible for him to marry her again. So what some people do is, because he's too quick to say, I divorce you, and every time he gets a little bit mad, I divorce you, but he really wants to keep her, then he works out something with somebody to marry her, consummate, and then divorce her so she can become halal again for him. That's called a tahleel marriage. And the Prophet ﷺ, la'ana Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, al-muhill wal-muhallal lah. And the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned that the curse of Allah is upon the one who does it, and the one who's involved in that marriage, and the one who he is doing it for. طيب. What was the permissible act here? Marriage. But it led to that forbidden act, which is a tahleel marriage. So anything that is permissible that leads to committing a forbidden act is considered to be haram. طيب. Benefits of knowing this principle. Read number 1. Okay, do we see where that comes from? Growing in consciousness and awareness of your actions. Once you know that almost everything you do leads to something else, you should be more conscious about even the little things. hoping for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's reward and fearing that you're doing something that is disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nah. Number two. Right. Where is this thing leading? So you need to start thinking things through. Learning to be comfortable with deliberation, not just doing things, but start thinking about where does this lead? Because if it leads to something that is haram, I need to cut it off right now. This has no good ending, and so just cut it off. Now.
Developing and increasing reverence for the Sharia.
Because what you see here, just like we see with the first principle, which deals with masalih and mafasid, or harm or detriment and benefit, and that we learn that Allah Azza wa Jalla is Al-Hakim, and we see that manifest itself. Here we see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy. That for every little thing we do, if we bring it to mind and we're more conscious that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward us for that. And that should allow us to grow in reverence for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tayyib. Right now, what I want you to do for the next 2 minutes with a partner, preferably the person who is sitting next to you, I want you to work on answering these questions. So you're going to test yourself and see if you understand. The questions are coming now. Pick a partner, even the young guys. You got to have a partner. Ready? Bismillah. 2 minutes. Right. All right, Bismillah. I was informed that there are some jawaiz, some gifts for those who get correct answers. But that's okay. We can worry about that next time, because your intention is just to get the right answer, not to get the gift, right? Okay. So number one. What does means adopt the rulings of their ends mean? What does this mean? We need the mic. We need the mic, Sheikh. Sahib al-mic. You can pick whoever you want, because I can't really see anyway. Pick whoever you want. Okay, so those are means. Anything that leads to, but what does the whole sentence mean?
That any ruling that is given through an obligation or a prohibition goes to the anything that leads to.
It also goes to anything that leads to. Excellent. Do the scholars differ about the validity of this principle? Absolutely not. They all agree to the validity of the principle. Number two, what are some texts? You don't have to do the Quran and the Sunnah, whatever you remember. What are some texts? We got a young guy here, mashallah. And a bunch of sisters, but you need a sister, as you wish. As you wish. I'm a guest. I don't know how things work. Is there a mic on that side or no? Text from the Quran and Sunnah. Alhamdulillah. Naam. That's good. Anybody remember a hadith? You can scream it out. مَنْ سَلَكَ طَرِيقًا يَلْتَمِسُ فِيهِ عِلْمًا. Whoever travels a path seeking therein knowledge. What is intended by ends and means in the context of this principle? We discussed that already. Number four. Some scholars have said that this principle is actually a branch of a larger universal maxim. Name it. Okay, we got some in the back. They're ready. MashaAllah. What is that larger universal principle? Right. MashaAllah. Can you translate that? Okay. Yani, actions, matters, deeds are according to their intentions. طيب. الأمور بمقاصدها. طيب. And then the last question here, is there a difference between this principle and the statement, the ends justify the means? Explain your answer. Okay, from the sister side. Now. This principle and the statement, the end justify the means.
Yes, there is a difference.
Okay.
Not always will the means be halal to achieve something which is halal. For example of Robin Hood, for example, and
That's good, right. So the means, if the means are impermissible, right, then just because you're trying to do something that is good does not make the means permissible. So when we talked about the means here, we're talking about things that are permissible in the first place, and then they'll adopt the ruling of the things that they lead to. All right, we're going to go through this next part very quickly. Anything that is essential to the fulfillment of a command is also commanded. Is one principle that falls under this principle. What is the relationship between the aforementioned principle and the following? Type, investing in the stock market. In order to invest in the stock market, you have to know that the stock that you are investing in is permissible. Otherwise, it's impermissible for you to put money in that company. That company may sell things that are haram. I mean, they may sell alcohol. They may sell pork products. They may sell, there's a whole, list of things that have to be avoided for a Muslim who is investing in the stock market as it relates to the product itself. Then you have to look at how that company makes its money. What is the percentage of the money that company is getting from, for example, interest-based savings that they may have or whatever. So investing in the stock market requires that you know, that you learn about what it is that you're investing in. Likewise, spousal rights. Spousal rights, hukuk az-zawjayn, the fact that your wife has rights over you. The fact that you have rights over your wife. This is something that, if you're married, you have to know them so that you can fulfill them. So it even goes back to knowledge here. And you won't be able to fulfill those rights, which are commanded, until you know what they are. So learning about them becomes an obligation to the end of it. I'm not going to go through each point. Give an example of a permissible act that leads to abandoning an obligation. Yes? A permissible act that leads to abandoning an obligation. Yeah, go ahead. What is it? Don't pray? No, we need a permissible act. It's permissible, but yes. Go ahead, just scream it. Sorry? Playing games during prayer time. So this is a permissible act. Playing games is permissible in general. But if you, depends on what kind of games we're playing. But if you do it at the prayer time and it leads to you leaving off praying in Jama'ah, for example, then it is impermissible for you to do. We're done with that. All right. Time is not on our side. So, bi'idhnillah, we're just going to try to work through these, inshallah ta'ala. All right. The next thing, and this one is super duper important. All right. And this is the third qa'idah that we're going to cover, and it deals with hardship. It deals with hardship. All right, let's go. Bismillah. Repeat after me. Al-mashaqqatu tajlibu at-taysir. All right, again, al-mashaqqatu tajlibu at-taysir. You will hear this principle a lot, okay? You'll see how a lot of what we've already covered, you're going to see how it falls into this. And we can translate that as hardship is a cause of alleviation. A lot of times it's translated as difficulty begets facility. However, that is not exactly what this means. The way that it's translated is closer to what it means. Because the difficulty itself doesn't bring about ease. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings about ease. But He brings it about because of difficulty, because of the hardship. So hardship is a cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bringing about alleviation. All right, so let's look at the questions here. Just make sure. Yeah, we have 2 sets of questions. Type number 1. Yalla bismillah. Speak directly into the mic so everybody can hear you. Jazakallah khair.
What does hardship is a cause of alleviation mean? Do the scholars differ about the validity of this principle?
I'm going to answer that now. The scholars do not differ at all. There's ijma' about the validity of this principle. Keep going.
What are some proofs from the Quran and Sunnah that point to the validity of this principle?
Yes.
Can someone pray in their car if they are embarrassed to pray in a parking lot?
See, that doesn't happen here. But in some places where there's no masajid around and it's time for prayer. Okay? And for those of you who come from Western countries, for example, you may have experienced this. There's no masjid around. The time is going to go in and go out, and you have to pray. Can you pray in the car? Because you're too embarrassed to pray in the parking lot, for example. Embarrassment is a hardship, right? You like to be embarrassed? Then embarrassment is a hardship. So is it okay? We'll look at that now.
What about the sister who genuinely feels that wearing hijab is a hardship?
Yeah, she says wearing hijab is difficult. Is it okay for her to say al-mashaqqatu tajlibu at-taysir? She says hardship is a cause of alleviation. I find it hard to wear hijab, so it's okay for me to not wear hijab. Number 4.
Who covers the diya for someone who has killed someone unintentionally? And how does that relate to this principle?
What is diya, by the way? It's translated as blood money usually. So who covers that? The diya for someone who has killed someone unintentionally. Number 5.
Give an example of the following types of alleviation.
Now I know you're looking at this right now and it looks very strange. By the half hour from now you'll be saying that's so easy. Now.
How does someone
No, read them. Give an example of the following types of alleviation.
reduction,
Uh-huh.
adaptation, removal, and postponement?
Okay.
How does someone in the hospital who is bedridden purify himself for prayer? How does he pray?
All right. All right. Bismillah. The general meaning of this principle. Hardship is a cause of alleviation. When we say hardship, what we are referring to is an abnormal difficulty, exceeding that which is generally associated with a specific type of worship. Again, when we think about worship, every form of worship that you do has some level of difficulty, or we can say there's a lack of comfort that may be associated with any type of worship. When you make Hajj, for example, isn't there some difficulty involved? Okay. Fasting, isn't there some kind, especially when the days are very long, isn't there some kind of difficulty involved? Is that difficulty beyond what you can bear? In general, no. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not burden a soul beyond what it can bear. And so Allah Azza wa Jal has been extremely compassionate with the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and He has removed the hardship that previous ummah have put upon themselves. They rejected Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's favor. And that's why our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, Inna dina yusrun. The deen is easy. The deen is easy. Now, if someone says, well, I hear you. You're saying that the deen is easy. But I'll be honest with you. Getting up for Fajr, it's not easy. It's difficult. And what do you mean? Hajj, that's not easy. Fasting, that's not easy. How do you answer that? Giving zakat, for example. Taking money out of my pocket, and that's not easy. How would you answer that? How would you answer that saying that the deen is easy? I'd love to hear what you have to say. You can scream it. Shaitan? Llah. Looking at the bigger picture. Yeah, go ahead. Being easy or difficult is relevant. Let's go a step further. Okay. The major ibadats of Islam that we all have to do are the pillars of Islam, right? So we've got Hajj, let's start in order. We've got Salat, Zakat, fasting, and Hajj. Okay, Salat. What's difficult about Salat? Let's just take Fajr, for example. The most difficult Salat upon the Munafiqeen, Fajr and Isha. Fajr, why is it difficult? Because you've got to wake up. Tell you, what time? 5 o'clock. I will tell you right now, there are non-Muslims all over the world who wake up before 5 o'clock every day. You know why they wake up? To make money. If people can do it for the dunya, then can't we do it for the deen? And is there really difficulty involved in that? Nah. Nothing abnormal, which is the point. We're talking about an abnormal difficulty. Other than that, there's no difficulty involved. Tell you. Zakat. How much zakat do you have to pay? 2.5% of what? Of what you make in a year? No, your surplus wealth. Is that difficult? You pay a VAT, don't you? 2.5%? You wish. You wish. On everything you buy in Dubai. So the reality is that it's not an abnormal difficulty. It doesn't exceed the things that we would normally do in the dunya for regular activities. Like fasting. Difficult? Not an abnormal difficulty, not for most people. If there is an abnormal difficulty, then guess what? Then that person doesn't have to fast, which we'll get to, inshallah. But under normal circumstances, there's not an abnormal difficulty. And if the doctor said to you, you need to fast for A, B, and C reasons, then most people are going to do as the doctor orders. They'll do it for the doctor. Then we need to be able to do that for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, all right, Hajj. Tell me this. Aren't there people all over the world, Muslim and non-Muslim, who spend a lot more money on vacations than they do for Hajj? Absolutely. So is it really difficult? And even the physical difficulty of Hajj. People go climbing mountains for fun. I mean, the Hajj is not like that. I mean, the point is people are going to do all types of things, but because it's for Allah, now it's difficult. See, so we have to be very careful when we look at the deen as a whole, the deen yusr. And the reality is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prescribes certain things for us that may have some degree of difficulty because you grow through being challenged. Once you reach a certain point in your deen, when Fajr becomes easy, Dhuhr becomes easy, Asr becomes easy. You know what you're supposed to do? You're supposed to pray rawatib, your sunan. When that becomes easy, you're supposed to pray duha, witr, and so forth. Right? Because you have to keep challenging yourself. That is how you get better, through challenging yourself. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts certain aspects or rituals, prescribes them for us so that we can become better people. And it's through that little challenge, which are not abnormal difficulties, that we advance. And there's nothing in life. For you brothers and sisters, for example, that go to the gym, if you bench press 50 kilos every day for a year, how much of your muscles going to grow? They're going to stop at a certain point because you're not putting anything on it. You're not challenging yourself anymore. You're not challenging those muscles. And so the reality is with the deen, we have to keep adding on little by little so that you challenge yourself, and then you will find there's no abnormal difficulty whatsoever. So that's, when we're talking about hardship, what are we talking about? Something that is beyond the norm. All right? Alleviation. Here, what that means is the removal, adaptation, removal. For example, somebody does not have the ability to fast. Then that obligation is lifted, it is removed. Something else comes in its place, it's substituted. The adaptation, that means that the worship is supposed to be performed a certain kind of way. But because you don't have the ability, then it's adapted. You change that, which we'll talk about. Or reduction. It was 4 rakats, but because you're traveling, it's 2 rakats. Okay? The removal, adaptation, or reduction of a previous ruling based on circumstances. Okay, so that's what we mean when we say alleviation. Hardship is a cause of alleviation. So if you look at the bottom and you see the red box, this is the meaning here. If the implementation of a ruling, in other words, if you do something that Allah has commanded you to do, if that causes undue hardship to a person, an abnormal difficulty, then the Sharia provides alternatives that help alleviate the hardship. Al-mashaqqatu tajlibu at-taysir. Hardship is a cause of alleviation. All right? Understand that so far? Okay. Let's look at some of the evidence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرِ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرِ. Allah wants ease for you and He does not want difficulty for you. يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ أَن يُخَفِّفَ عَنْكُمْ. Allah wants to lighten your burden. لَا يُكَلِّفُ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا مَا أَتَاهَا. Allah requires not of a soul beyond the capacity with which He has endowed it. I think these are pretty obvious. I don't think they need any explanation. It's clear that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants ease for this ummah. And Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَمَا جَعَلَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ مِنْ حَرَجٍ. He has made nothing in the religion burdensome. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, إِنَّ الدِّينَ يُسْرٌ. Indeed, the religion is easy. How many texts have we looked at so far? 5, alhamdulillah. All right. There's nothing burdensome in the Sharia. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that he has been sent with al-Hanifiyyah as-Samha. Al-Hanifiyyah as-Samha. Anybody know what Hanif means? Monotheist. Hanif actually, Hanif means to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is actually what Hanif means, to turn to something and turn away from everything else. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described a prophet in the Quran as being Hanif. Do you remember who it was? Ibrahim. كان حنيفا مسلما وما كان من المشركين. What made him Hanif? That he turned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he turned away from the idols. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam has said that he has been sent with al-Hanifiyyah. Yani, that is the deen that is worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. As-samha, it's accommodating, it's tolerant. Yani, there's no difficulty in the deen. All right, so if we look at that, we talked about prayer, we talked about zakat, we talked about fasting, we talked about hajj, which are the pillars of our faith, or the pillars of the deen, none of which are difficult. And then on top of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has legislated things that make the obligations easier. I'll give you an example. How long do we have to fast every year? 30 days, 29 or 30 days. Tayyib. What makes it easier for us to fast? No, not just the Mondays and Thursdays, that we're all fasting at the same time. And so it makes it easier. Now just imagine if you were fasting for 3 days, 10 months out the year, but your husband was fasting a different 3 days, and then the kids were fasting a different and everything was, it all comes out in 30 days, but you're doing it at different times. It's not going to be the same. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has legislated for us things that even make the ease easier. And this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy. Now, understanding that, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam told Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, إِنَّمَا أَجْرُكِ عَلَى قَدَرِ نَصَبَكِ. Your reward is according to the difficulty. Reward. So we're saying that the deen is easy, but the reward is according to the difficulty. So should you do things that make the ibadah more difficult? For example, on Hajj, your plane is going to go from Dubai, it's going to land where? In Jeddah, right? You say, no, I'm not catching the bus. I'm not catching the bus to Mecca. I'm going to walk. Because it's more difficult. And the Prophet said, your reward is according to the difficulty. It's true, right? The reward is according to the difficulty, correct? It's true. Tayyib. Should you walk or should you catch the bus? Catch the bus. Yes, because what the Prophet ﷺ is talking about in this hadith, which is that the reward is according to the difficulty, is difficulty that you don't impose on yourself. Okay? It's not self-imposed difficulty. It's a difficulty that comes as a result of things that are outside of your control. And so the more things become difficult, not that you made them difficult for yourself, but that's just the way it happened to go down. The bus broke down and you had to get off the bus and you had to walk. Now your reward is according to the difficulty. You understand? Jayyid. Okay. Nice. اقرأ يا Sheikh. Bismillah.
All legal concessions are extensions of this principle.
When we say legal concessions, what does that say in Arabic? Al-rukhas al-shar'iyya, which is the plural of ruqsa, right? Which is the opposite of al-azima. All right, so most things in Islam are azaim, meaning that they are strict duties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and He commands us with. But then there is the rukhsa, which is a concession. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves that you do the concessions just as He loves that you do the duties themselves. Every concession in Islam is an extension of this principle. So for example, read the first one.
Shortening the prayer.
Shortening the prayer is a concession. What is the norm? You pray Dhuhr and Asr and Isha. How many rak'ahs? 4 rak'ahs. Can you shorten the prayer? When? When can you shorten prayer? When you're traveling. When you're traveling, you can shorten the prayer. This is a rukhsa, and this is a branch or is an extension of al-mashaqqatu tajlibu at-taysir. Next.
Combining the prayer.
Combining the prayer. When can you combine prayers? When you're traveling? When you're sick? When the weather is bad, where? In your house you can combine? In the masjid? One opinion. That's correct. Tayyib. Keep going. Keep going, Sheikh. La, breaking. Breaking an obligatory fast. When can you break an obligatory fast? If you're sick, when you're traveling, menstruating. But we talk about that. But here we're talking about the rukhsa, which is that you have a concession not to do so, even though you actually can, which is you can still fast when you're traveling. You can still fast when you're sick, depending on the level of illness, right? Keep going.
Wiping over the khuf for 3 days.
Right, which is also, what is the khuf? The leather sock. Socks are by an extension. All right, let's keep it moving. Examples. So let's look at some examples from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that indicate this particular maxim or this particular principle, which is that hardship is a cause of alleviation. عن عمران بن حسين رضي الله عنه قال كانت بي بواسير فسألت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من الصلاة فقال صل قائما فإن لم تستطع فقاعدا فإن لم تستطع فعلى جنب. This is collected by Al-Bukhari. Imran ibn Hussein said, I had piles. What are piles? Hemorrhoids. So I asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about prayer. And in other words, he was finding it difficult to stand up, maybe even finding it difficult to sit down. So the Prophet ﷺ said, pray standing. But if you can't, pray while sitting. And if you cannot even do that, then pray lying on your side. Okay. So the Prophet ﷺ said, pray standing. Why did the Prophet ﷺ say pray standing? Standing is what in your prayer? It's a rukn, right? It's an essential element of the prayer. You have to pray standing up. Okay, that's the rule. So here, the Prophet ﷺ told him, but if you can't, if you cannot, then pray while sitting. Okay, I want us to look at this here. Imran ibn Hussein, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, did he have 2 feet and 2 legs? Yes. Could he physically stand up? Yes. He could physically stand up. Otherwise, the Prophet ﷺ would have never told him, pray standing. That would have been no point of saying that. So when he says, if you can't, pray while sitting. What does that mean, if you can't? That means if you don't have the ability at all, that's not what it means here. It means that if it causes you an abnormal difficulty, then you can pray while sitting. What is an abnormal difficulty while standing? An abnormal difficulty while standing is that when you say Allahu Akbar and you're standing in prayer, all you're thinking about is, when can I stop standing? It's so difficult. So you're not thinking, you don't have any khushu' in your prayer, which khushu' is a very important part of your prayer. You can't even think beyond the fact that it's difficult for you to stand. Tayyib. So based on this, if a woman is in her last trimester, can she pray sitting down? See, all the women say yes. The brothers are saying, but you can still walk around the mall. We've tried it out. So what do you mean you can't stand? And then the sisters respond by saying, walking is different than standing because you're moving. Standing in one place for any length of time is difficult. And so if that's the case, then she can sit down because it's causing an abnormal difficulty. Okay. What if someone is on a plane and Salat is going to come in and go out while he's on the plane? Can he pray sitting down? Yes. What if he's on Saudi Airlines? Right. So we're going to say if he can't stand, then he can pray sitting down because the prayer. However, it's important to note, if the prayer is not going to go out while you're on the plane, then you have to delay the prayer and pray it once you land. Because you're losing a lot of the arkan of Salat by praying sitting down. All right? Because you're not just losing the standing, you're losing ruku', you're losing sujood, right? So if the prayer is still going to be in when you land, then you pray after you land and you don't pray on the plane. Clear? Yes. Is it dependent on the time zone? It depends on what time is going to be when you land. So when you're traveling from east to west, for example, a lot of times the time is going to get condensed. So for example, Fajr, when traveling from east to west, most of the time Fajr is not going to be more than a half hour. It's going to come in and go out like that. So you have to pray while you're on the plane. But when traveling from west to east, the time is expanding. And so it doesn't, it's about what time it is when you're on the plane and what it's going to be when you land. So for example, I'll give you an example. If you leave from Dubai and you're going to travel to America, for example, when you're going west, let's just say you leave before Fajr and you plan on landing in the United States, it's going to be 10 a.m., 11 a.m. While you're on the plane, the only prayer that you're going to make is what? Fajr. It's the only prayer you're going to make, even though you've been on the plane for 14 hours. Because once you land, it's still not going to be Dhuhr time. Even if on the plane, there's a Dhuhr time. However, you would know that. Okay? So as long as you know that when you land, the prayer is still going to be in, that is that particular prayer that you haven't prayed, then that's what's upon you, inshallah. Okay. Next question related to this particular hadith. We have our person who now is at the mall. And Salat's going to be going out in 20 minutes. And they're not going to be able to get to a masjid. And the only option they have is to pray outside. But they know that if they pray outside, or they feel like if they pray outside, people are going to look at them, they're going to laugh, ha, 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 look at that Muslim over there. And so they don't want to be embarrassed, so they go and sit in the car and they pray. Did they leave off a rukn of the prayer? Yes, they did. Is that permissible? Yes or no? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because being embarrassed is not a hardship, is not an abnormal hardship. It's not an abnormal difficulty. And a lot of it is psychological. In other words, it's an insecurity that you have about your own faith. You need to just learn a little bit more about Islam and be comfortable with your deen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us about that in the Quran. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ أَجْرَمُوا كَانُوا مِنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا يَضْحَكُونَ. Those criminals, and the worst of crimes, It doesn't mean here that like they're going against the law. The worst of crimes is to associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ أَجْرَمُوا كَانُوا مِنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا يَضْحَكُونَ. They used to laugh at the believers. وَإِذَا مَرُّوا بِهِمْ يَتَغَامَزُونَ. And when they would go by them, they would mock them, they would tease them. Right? But what's going to happen? The tides are going to turn. فَالْيَوْمَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنَ الْكُفَّارِ يَضْحَكُونَ عَلَى الْأَرَائِكِ يَنْظُرُونَ هَلْ ثُوِبَ الْكُفَّارُ مَا كَانُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. The point is that is not a valid excuse. But I'll give you another example. Let's just say it's a sister and she has her young child with her, for example, and the time for Salat is going to go out. And she's in a neighborhood or an area where she fears that if she's outside praying that somebody may attack her, somebody may hurt her or her child. Can she pray in the car? Yes, because that's an abnormal difficulty. That's an abnormal difficulty, all right? And here we would say the protection of herself and her child becomes a darura in that sense. طيب. Next example. Imam Muslim, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, حدثنا يحيى بن يحيى قال قرأت على مالك النافع أن ابن عمر رضي الله تعالى عنهما أذن بالصلاة في ليلة ذات برد وريح فقال ألا صلوا في الرحال يعني the adhan ألا صلوا في الرحال ثم قال كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يأمر المؤذن إذا كانت ليلة باردة ذات مطر يقول ألا صلوا في الرحال. Okay, Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu called the adhan for prayer. It was a cold, windy night. Cold and windy. And he said, pray in your homes, in your dwellings. This is Ibn Umar that said that. He then said, when it was a cold, rainy night, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, used to command the mu'adhin to say, ألا صلوا في الرحال. Pray in your dwellings. Okay. Where's the command? What is the, okay, what's happening here? Where's the difficulty? Let's start there. Where's the difficulty? Right, it's rainy, it's cold, it's windy. Okay. And the difficulty is the what? In getting to the masjid. In getting to the masjid. All right? Now some people, the minute they see rain, they won't go to the masjid, but they will go to the mall, which is a problem. And this is why, as the scholars of Islam have mentioned, what is meant about the rain that keeps you away from the jama'ah is the rain that under normal circumstances, it slows down society. In other words, people cancel appointments and things like this. They're not moving like they normally would move. Otherwise, to not go to the masjid, but still everything else in your life is normal. You're going to go to the mall and, tala'a madri ish, then no. Then that's not enough to keep you away from the masjid. All right. So, here the difficulty comes with the rain, and the command is to pray in jama'ah. That's the normal command, is that you have to pray in the masjid. But because of that difficulty, the Prophet ﷺ brought about ease, which was what? Ala sallu fir rihal. Pray in your dwellings. All right? So the asl is that whoever hears the mu'adhin say, Hayya ala salah, hayya ala falah, then they have to answer. They have to answer that call. But here, the Prophet ﷺ made a concession, and that is to pray in your dwellings. طيب. When do you say, if you're the mu'adhin, anybody here mu'adhin? Nobody? Allahu Akbar. I'm only looking on this side, by the way. If you look over there, it's problems. In America, we have female mu'adhins, but that's a problem. طيب. ألا صلوا rihal. Pray in your dwellings. When is that said? When should that be said? After hayya ala al-falah. So, no. طيب. After hayya ala salah, hayya ala al-falah, then the mu'adhin will say, ala sallu fi rihal. That's one way of doing it. There are three different narrations. All of them are authentic. Another one is that it's said at the very end of the adhan. So once you finish everything, then you say, ala sallu fi rihal. And another narration, it is after the shahadatain. So after you say, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, and then you say, prior to saying, hayya ala salah, you would say, ala sallu fi rihal. Okay. And this hadith, for those of you who read Arabic, is the only hadith, I think, in this entire presentation where you'll see an isnad. So Imam Muslim said, حدثنا يحيى بن يحيى قال قرأت على مالك عن نافع عن ابن عمر. Anybody know why that's there? Scholars of hadith. I know there's some scholars of hadith over on this side, at least. Because it's the golden chain. The golden, like a gold chain you wear around your neck. What is a golden chain? What is that? Right, so every hadith has a chain of narrators, which is one of the beautiful things about our deen. Wallahi alhamdulillah. We should praise Allah Azza wa Jal for having inspired such a system of preservation. We know that this is something that the Prophet ﷺ said. Malik, meaning Imam Malik, Imam of Dar al-Hijrah, the Imam of Medina, who died in 179 after the Hijrah, he narrates on his Sheikh, Nafi'. And Nafi' was the freed slave of Ibn Umar, radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, and was very close to Ibn Umar. And so Malik narrates on Nafi' and Ibn Umar. That's what they call a silsila al-dhahabiyya. Right? The golden chain, meaning chain of transmission. Right. Another example. Read the English here.
Abu Hurairah reported that Khawla bint Yasar came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, Messenger of Allah, I have only one garment and I menstruated it. How should I do? He said, when you are purified, wash it and pray in it. She asked, what if the trace of blood remains? He said, washing it suffices and its trace will not harm you.
So here we have al-mashaqqa, difficulty. Because she only has one garment and she tried to wash it and that's what came out, the trace that remains or the stain or whatever like that, she's not held accountable for that. Normally all impurities would have to be removed. But because there's difficulty here, the Prophet ﷺ did not hold her accountable for that. This is collected by Abu Dawood, and the Sheikh Albani, Allah yarhamu, graded it as being authentic. Now, keep going.
I had a wet dream.
Who did? Astaghfirullah. No, I'm not trying to be funny. It's just this is Amr ibn al-As. I should have said that in the beginning. I'm sorry. Amr ibn al-As narrated.
I had a wet dream on a cold night during the battle of Tada.
When was that to Salasil? Which year? It was the 8th year after the Hijrah. Nah.
I was afraid that I would die if I performed ghusl. So I made the
Okay, because why was he afraid that he would die if he made ghusl? Because it's so cold, right? And he's scared that if he, bathes himself, that he is going to die. So he did what? Go ahead.
So I made tayammum and then led my companions in the Fajr prayer.
When he says he led his companions, that's because he was the head of the brigade. Okay? Nah.
They later informed the Messenger of Allah ﷺ about that. He said, Amr, you led your companions in prayer while in a state of janaba. I explained to him what kept me from washing, and then said, I heard Allah say, do not kill yourself. Verily Allah is merciful to you.
لا تقتلوا أنفسكم إن الله كان بكم رحيما.
The Messenger of Allah ﷺ
Okay. So what was the difficulty here? Performing ghusl. The ease, the alleviation that came, he was permitted to make tayammum as a means of purification. Clear? So all of these are examples of this particular maxim. All right. Bismillah. Fadl Sheikh, Iqra. Examples.
Examples of this principle. Praying sitting down, making tayammum.
So again, when can you pray sitting down? When standing is either impossible. Now, the person, he's in a wheelchair, he cannot physically stand up, paralyzed from, whatever, the waist down. He can't physically stand up, it's impossible. Or when doing it would create an abnormal difficulty, like is the case with many pregnant sisters. Yeah. Go ahead, making
tayammum.
When can you make tayammum? Number one, when there's no water at all. Number two, when you cannot use the water. In other words, a person is sick, or they have an open wound, for example, and they cannot use water on that part. They're going to make, according to many of the scholars, they're going to make wudu, and they're going to wash what they can, and then they're going to perform tayammum for the part that they were not able to wash. All right? Yeah, go ahead.
No ritual purification at times.
Sometimes a person is not obligated to purify himself at all. Anybody have any examples? He's not required to make wudu or tayammum. Again? A person that's in the ICU? I have an example. For example, a prisoner of war, okay? Let's just say they put handcuffs on him, for example. He can't do tayammum, and he obviously can't make wudu, and he's waiting. They got him in a holding cell, for example. Right? Here he still has to pray. He's not obligated to do tahara. I'll give you another example, which actually might happen. Let's say you're on a plane, and my example, you're going from west to east. So Salat al-Fajr comes in and goes out like that. All right? And during the time when you want to pray, there's turbulence. Yeah, there's turbulence, and they've got the fasten seatbelt sign. You stand up, they will scream at you. There's, sir, sit down. Nothing's happening. So you can't even stand up. You can't go make wudu or anything like that. But the salat is going to go in salat is going to come in and go out. In this scenario, you can pray without tahara. Now,
Not facing the qibla in prayer.
when can a person not face the qibla in prayer? Obligatory prayer. Same scenario. If a person's on a plane and they can't stand up, then obviously a lot of times they're not going to be facing the qibla. Now,
Leaving the Muzdalifah early.
for Hajj, leaving Muzdalifah early, because it is difficult for elderly people to stay the entire night. They can leave early, and even those who are accompanying them, like Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, who left with the women and those who are had some ailments and things like that, they left Muzdalifah early because of the difficulty. Wal mashaqqatu tajlibu at-taysir. Now,
The permissibility of tawheed.
what is tawqir? It's when you assign someone else to do something on your behalf. So on Hajj, for example, for some people it is permissible for them to assign others to stone on their behalf, for example. And this is an example of hardship being a cause of alleviation.
Continuing the fast after eating.
After unintentional eating, right? So what happens if a person is fasting and it's Ramadan, and then they eat something and they forgetfully, they forgot and they ate something? Do they have to make up that entire day? No. إِنَّمَا أَطْعَمَهُ اللَّهُ وَسَقَاهُ. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that gave him food and drink. right? And so that person can continue that fast, even though they actually consume something which breaks the fast. But in this case, they can continue because al-mashaqqatu tajlibu at-taysir. All right. Now, let's look at the types of alleviation. We're going to do this quickly. All right. Okay. Now, listen to the instructions, please. You ready? I want one example only, but you're going to call it out. So I'm going to call on you. So just raise your hand. Not two examples, one, and there's a reason for it. Types of alleviation. So when we talk, and we've covered a few of these, when we talk about removal, meaning that the entire act of ibadah has been removed for this type of person. What, like what? Yes, here.
For instance, an innocent person is removed from praying.
Okay. A sick person.
Insane, mad, sick.
Oh, he's mad. Okay, okay, I got it. So someone who's insane, all of the takalif al-shar'iyya are removed from him. They don't have to do anything from Islam. So give me another example. Yeah, go ahead, scream it. Okay. For what? For fasting. Okay, so a menstruating woman doesn't have to fast. All right, fine. Number 2, reduction. Yes. Okay, so when you're traveling, you can shorten the prayer. So you're reducing, right? You're reducing the number. Number 3, substitution. Ramadan fasting for who? Okay, for someone who has a chronic illness that they don't expect to be cured from, then this person's fast, he doesn't fast anymore. It's substituted with what? Feeding, with feeding the poor. Okay. Adaptation. We covered it. Yes.
Combining the prayers while traveling or in other hardship.
Combining. Would that be adaptation? Praying sitting down. So the asl is still there. You've adapted it. So instead of standing, you pray sitting. Type postponement, meaning that like traveling. Okay, so you can pray Salat, you can pray Maghrib with Isha, right? And so you postpone. Type advance. You pray Isha with Maghrib. Okay,